The advice and opinions expressed by the host of Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. The Center for Autism and Related Disorders advises working with a board-certified behavior analyst who has experience with autism before starting any intensive behavioral intervention. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
Good morning and welcome to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod and we're coming to you live from many locations around the state of California this morning. Thrilled to be here with you this morning. We are going to be live with you for the next hour, and Evelyn Kung, you can see her on the screen. She is here next to me because she's going to be joining us for Ask Evelyn Kung. I want to make sure that you guys know that the hour is meant to be interactive. We want to hear from you. We want to know your thoughts, your feelings, your questions, and your concerns. There's a myriad of ways that you can write into us and be a part of the show. If you want to, you can go to autism-live.com. There is a live feature at the bottom. I will tell you that if you're watching the show live, you're probably watching us on Facebook or YouTube or Twitter or Periscope. The two most convenient ways to write in right now with current setup are on Facebook and on YouTube. We encourage you to write your questions in early, starting right now. We do have some questions that we got throughout last night and a couple of days ago, but we are taking questions live. And I know sometimes you guys get frustrated and you're like, how come she's not taking my question? There's like this tipping point where people start about 20 minutes into the hour, everybody starts to write in, and then we don't get through all of them. So I really encourage you to write in early and often. Persistence also wins the day. I want to remind you that we do podcast to many different sites and more coming, that we are now on. Not only will we podcast to YouTube and you can watch us still recorded on Facebook and Twitter and Periscope, but we're also a free download on iTunes, and you can choose. You can just download the audio, or you can do the audio and the video portion. We're also on Deezer, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and a few more. We just started doing, I can't remember what their names are. Ghana, we're on Ghana, and there's another one too, I don't know, but more coming. So we're very excited about that. Before we get to Evelyn Kung, I gotta take just a couple of minutes because in the last couple of days, so many people have emailed me and about a story that has been unfolding in the news. Of course, I'm talking about the young man who was shot several times in the state of Utah. If you watch the show, you know that I don't like to use names. In this case, I don't want to use the name because it's a 13-year-old. And even though his name is out there in the press, I think that we need to preserve some anonymity for him and his family. But in general, I don't like to use names here because I do think that there is a whole segment of the world that functions on attention and then says, oh, well, you know, if bad things happen, then people talk about me, and I don't want to in any way further that. I want to start by saying, first of all, that I feel so badly for this family and for this mom, because if you know the story, you know that she called the police and asked for a crisis unit to come to her house because her 13-year-old son was having a meltdown. She reports that it's because she went to work for the first time in a year and he was having extreme separation anxiety. She needed support. She needed help. She was asking for them to take her child, I guess, into custody for a mental health situation. And that instead what happened was that they came and within 5 minutes, shots were fired. And this young man is in the hospital and recovering from multiple gunshot wounds. And it's not the first time that we've heard this. And it's not the first state where we've seen this happening. And it made me think back to earlier this summer when we did a show and talked about Black Lives Matter. And somebody wrote to me afterwards, so angry, and said, why are you talking about this? Why don't you stick to autism? And I, came back on the show. I had a great conversation with this person, by the way. And we saw that once we talked, we were more on the same page than previously they thought we were. But I remember saying, if you think that these kinds of things, excessive force, are not happening within the disability community and the autism community, I think you need to think again. Now, I do feel the need to say that on Friday, we are doing a show in which we're honoring people who are first responders who have kiddos that are on the autism spectrum. And I still fully plan to do that. And I think that that's an important thing to do. I don't think that the police entered that home with the idea that this is how it was going to happen. I'm a former teacher, so I'm about training. And I understand that the police department is reporting that they have done mental health training with the police. But I said to somebody last night, when you send a hammer to do the work of a spatula, you cannot be surprised when the outcome is not what you'd hoped. And as much as we can say that we, in some cases, we're giving some training to the police, I don't think it's the right training. And it's a very scary proposition. But when we say that more than 2% of the population is now on the autism spectrum, if we are not fully educating our police to respond in a different way, and I think this does, it's a different situation, but it goes hand in hand with Black Lives Matter. Until we have a police department that functions in situations where they are appropriate and have appropriate training for that, and we have other people who are trained to respond in other ways to other things, we are going to continue to have problems. So it's training and sending the right people to do the right things. This is my opinion. I'm poor Evelyn. She's forced to sit here and listen to this, but I want to be clear for us. I just felt so powerless the last couple of days. Like, we do all these things and the work is not done and you feel powerless. And if this can happen to this 13-year-old, the truth is that it could happen to anyone. And if it could happen to this mom, it could happen to anyone. We reach out and we ask for help, and then help arrives and it's not helpful. You know what I'm saying? It is important that we do perspective taking. For any of us that are parents who have had our children have a meltdown, if you can honestly sit there and say that you weren't afraid, I say congratulations to you, because I know tons of parents who are afraid when their child has a meltdown. They're afraid for their child's safety. In some cases, they are afraid for their safety. This is a very real thing, and we can't sweep it under the carpet, and we can't just rely on police to school themselves and to know what to do. I think as an autism community, we have to start at home. We have to school all of ourselves in how do we deal with a meltdown? How do we handle it? How do we de-escalate? How do we recognize that it's coming? How do we know what to do to help our kids in those circumstances? And then once we have that, those of us who have that, need to work to train police and to train politicians to understand that the police are not going to be the right people to respond to this circumstance. And even though they are not the right people, they have to be trained, because sometimes they're going to find themselves there anyway. And that what we are seeing, and this is the parallel that I see behind Black Lives Matter, is that we are sending people into a situation and they are bringing their preconceived notions of the world and their prejudices. And they are looking at a situation and they are basing their reactions, which are going to be fear-based, when it is a situation where they don't feel in control, and then they are reacting on their prejudices. And if we don't solve that, it's the phrase that everybody is saying, until each and every one of us is safe, none of us is safe. My heart bleeds in 68 different directions. I have friends and family that are first responders and who are talking about how fearful they are always on any given day in their jobs, but now it is escalated. And I feel horrible about that, but where does it stop? And for me, it starts with the education piece. And we can say they need to learn that, they need to learn that. But here at Autism Live, I'm going to take the tack with all of us that we need to learn what to do. And I do not think that this mom responded in any way that was inappropriate. She did what she had to do, and she gave information to the police and said, this is how you should handle this. And that did not happen. So I don't know. That's what I have to say. We're going to continue on the show to talk about how do we help our children? How do we teach our children how to react to the police? We'll continue to advocate for reform so that there are more social workers. We'll continue to advocate for police getting training that really works. Years ago, when I was a college professor teaching a communications class, one of the gentlemen who was in my class was a night class, and he was the chief of the fire department, the local fire department. And one day I remember, I will never forget, he was telling me about an exercise they had just done with his new recruits. And he said, Shannon, I can train these young people and I can train them and I can teach them everything there is to fire. But when they're in a fire, it's an entirely different situation. And so he does an exercise every year where they find an old building and they burn it down. And they send the young recruits in to see what it is like to be in there, because he says everybody, you know, when you get the smell and that it's, you can't see anything in a fire, and he said nobody can prepare you for that until you're there. And I do think that as an autism community, we need to be more open. It's hard because we don't want to be telling on our kids, but we need to be showing police what a tantrum meltdown looks like. We need to be really transparent with them and go, this is what this looks like. And my child can be this much better 10 minutes later. They are not like this all the time. It's hard. It's really, really hard because none of us wants the world to see what our children are like when they are not themselves and not at their best, right? But we got to do something different. All right, I'm done. Off the soapbox. Evelyn Kung is here, and she is the amazing person at CARD that we all run to for clinical advice. Evelyn, talk to us for just a second here about what you do at CARD. And thank you for being here. And sorry that you had to sit there through all of that.
No, thank you for addressing these issues, because I've been in the field for 30 years now, and I've seen a lot of mess. I've seen a lot of good things with the police, but I've seen messes too. And, you know, when I saw this article on this child, I just thought, oh, you know, the tense and the stress on both sides, you know, for the first responders and for the families experiencing, you know, the safety, you know, worries. It's always been there, but I think right now it's even worse. You know, it's intensified on both ends. People worry about the safety on both ends. So it's very legitimate, everything that you're talking about. I mean, I have stories and stories, unfortunately, on the good and the bad of these experiences. And so I am, I'm at CARD. I've been here for almost 30 years. When I came into the field, every time I said autism, people had no clue. They'd be like, oh, autistic? So you draw well? You teach people how to that was always the response the first 5 years in this field. And then now it's changed because, you know, 1 in 58, I think that's the number, right? Every person, every age knows somebody on the spectrum. Does not matter. I used to go into classrooms and nobody knew anybody on the spectrum except for maybe the kid, you know, I was working with there. But now every child raises their hand if they know anybody, and it's not including the child in their classroom. It's my neighbor, my cousin, my aunt, my uncle, you know, just everybody knows someone now. And little 5-year-olds can give you all the theories about autism too. And I just look at them and think, you should not know this. You are 5. You need to be playing. You should not be worrying about why somebody, you know, why this is here. But so in many ways, it's been, I've been there with the growth or in the population of people with ASD. And I've seen, you know, all the different, you know, treatments come in and out. But I always say that I've been very blessed because I've had some really, really great great patients that I've worked with, and I've seen some really great outcomes. I've seen a lot. And that's why Shannon says, like, when people don't know, they will come my way. But a lot of it has to do with just like 30 years ago, nobody knew anything about people on the spectrum. So it was figure it out. sit there and problem solve. And to this day, I still say that my favorite thing about this job is working with the families and helping them problem solve where they're at. That is still my favorite thing.
Well, and it's such a delight for all of us. It's such a treat for us because you do kind of weave yourself in and out, and visit cases and bring your expertise for so many families. And you're very modest because you have had tremendous outcomes on so many cases. And over the years, one of the things that amazed me when I first got to know you was all the teenagers that at that time, and that was 10 years ago, you had all these teenagers who had graduated from their card program, and then I would meet with you, and I had a kiddo who was not a teenager yet, but you were trying to quiet my fears, and you were like, oh, so somebody called me the other day, you have all these ex-clients who would call you and just ask you a question about something. And even then I was telling you, you need to, what I envisioned was not even a book, but I wanted a little slide thing that had a little window that it's like, this one says, if someone does this, this is the social response for that. That's what I pictured. But so that was 10 years ago. And now these people are like older and married, and like you have the best stories of how life goes on and how little kids grow into teenagers and grow into adults. And when they have the right supports, find all different paths in their lives. So, I just have appreciated that over the last 10 years of not just, and you've been somebody who's been instrumental for my son and helping me to figure out where to go, as we moved into the teenage years. And I so appreciated that. But I think just hearing all your stories, it's such a gift. You're such a gift to all of us.
Thank you. But yeah, I've actually spent this quarantine, people are reaching out more.
Mm-hmm.
From families that I haven't seen in 25 or more years. And I always laugh because I think, wow, I was so young and I was your supervisor and you had 5 kids and I was telling you what to do. Like, how could that be?
And you hadn't even had kids at that point.
Yep. So I was like, oh, I just remember like, I shouldn't have said that. Sorry. I've had a couple of therapists come back to me now and say, I just want to say, I remember a day when I said to you something, and now I'm a parent and I want to take it back. Definitely.
And I'm like, that's interesting because I just thought, look at them. They're so much younger than me and they know so much more. But it's that perspective taking piece of when you tell somebody to do something that you have no idea how hard it is until you're a parent on your own. It's not that they were wrong, but they were saying that it was just hard. And the fact that I wasn't able to do it the first time was not surprising.
Well, I think I could have said it in a much better way.
There you go.
I always think I didn't need to tell you that in those words.
Oh my goodness, my goodness. And we should say, really want to thank you for being with us here today. Do you want us to do a birthday shout out to someone you love? Or no, you don't have to.
My daughter. Yeah, my oldest turned 21 today.
That's amazing. Happy birthday. That's crazy. 21. I can't even believe that. Well, I'm glad that you could be with us today, but I'm sorry that you're not able to be there with her. But I'm going to jump into some questions here. And as I said, you guys can be writing in. I see that you already are. I'm going to actually go to a live question. Why can my son tell me his wants, needs, but he can't have conversations? I ask him questions, he doesn't respond.
Oh, there's a big divide, or maybe there's a field between being able to request what you want and being able to respond to questions. It can be anything from as simple as just understanding what all the words mean, definitions of all those words. But the beginning of communication is asking for wants and needs, because things are concrete and real to him. He knows exactly what those words are. He knows that if he says, can I have, or I want, with whatever the object or, item is, it gets delivered, in some format. So it's a very concrete thing. When you move from just basic requests or asking to conversations. Conversations are very theoretical. It's abstract because you're talking about concepts and things like in the future and the past, or, you know, there's all these descriptive words that belong to it. And if your child has any type of language delay and doesn't know all those words means, then it just is nonsense. You know, they don't know what time is. And if you just think about development, a lot of typical kids do not know what time is till they're in their school-aged years. And in that time, they've had so much language from, you know, birth to 7 or 6 or 5 or whatever it is. So it's a big jump. So what I encourage families to do is, it's great that they start learning what they're asking for because it meets those basic needs, but you're going to gradually increase the words that they're learning. You're going to gradually increase the concepts that they're learning so they understand it in a very simple way. Like when my kids were younger, I used to always say, if their father went on a work trip, I would say, there's 20 times you have to go to sleep and wake up. And when they were really little, I would have to include sleep and wake up as their naps had to be included.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
So,
but as a way to mark time, you're going to go to sleep 20 times before you see me again.
yeah, and
Yeah.
I would have to do it in a very concrete way. And that's this. And the only reason I knew to do that is because I worked with kids on the spectrum. You know, I wouldn't know that if I wasn't doing it. I had to make it whatever concrete in a way for them for whatever developmental stage they were at. And that's the same thing that I would encourage you is, you know, talking and having those conversations. There's a lot of words in there. And just that alone will prevent them from being able to respond. And then also, they don't have that social understanding of when I talk to you, you get really happy. You know, the enjoyment, social enjoyment may not be there yet because for them, speaking might be very effortful.
Yeah.
A lot of effort put into being able to talk. So until language actually becomes more fluent, it's not fun to talk. It's a lot of work.
And can I say too, I see this trend right now that a lot of people, they get speech, their kids aren't speaking and they get speech services. And they'll ask a question about something that's behavioral and they'll go, oh, I want to know about that from an ABA perspective, but we haven't done ABA because we really want to work on speech. So we're getting speech therapy, which is upside down. And I just want to say to people that when my son was going through ABA treatment, because, you know, he had autism and part of that was that he wasn't speaking, I got to watch, and I always talk about how weird ABA looked to me. Like there was that, you know, I was like, I want my child to speak. I want him to go to college. And then they, you know, they brought him in and they were like, touch car. And I always say, I was like, touch car? How are we gonna get to college on touch car? I want him to say, I went to school and this happened. And hey, mom, did you know about this and whatever? How are we gonna get there? And touch car, that's not gonna do it. But I watched the progression as they did touch car and then said, what is that? It's a car. And then it was, tell me, you know, over a period of time with a bunch of lessons and a bunch of prompting, tell me 3 things about a car. What else, you know, and then they would say, let's talk about, you know, give me an example of a vehicle. Oh, well, a car is a vehicle, right? And they would add in all these other things, plus give him all this other talk about general knowledge stuff so that he had something to talk about. And then they would painstakingly prompt like a volley of a tennis ball, where they would say, hey, Jem, how are you? And Jem would go, good, right? And they would say, now ask me how I am. Right? And he would say, how are you? And they would say, good. And he would walk away and they would say, come back. What else could you ask me? Right? And go through this whole painstaking process. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, it will never just happen spontaneously. And then a day came where somebody said, how are you? And he said, I'm good. How are you? What? Like we didn't have to prompt it anymore. And then a day came where they said, you know, how are you, Jem? He said, I'm good. How are you? Hey, you know what? I saw in a magazine that it did this thing that you like. What? And, you know, and I remember they would have us count, like how many volleys back and forth could you go until one day we got to 7 and then I stopped counting. Yeah. But it didn't magic. Nobody came in and waved a wand. It was work. It was work and they made it fun for him. So if you're just doing speech, that's not going to happen. You're not going to get enough funding for speech to do that. You know, help me out here, Evelyn, but this is why you need to do ABA.
And that's why if you hear what I just said, I said communication, not speech. Because it's communication that they need to understand first. Because once they realize I say these words and suddenly it appears, that's the beginning of communication with somebody. And so words and speech and language may be a method there, but it's what you want that kid to understand is if I use these words, all these things can come back, and not just the things I want. I can find out information. I can get a hold of understanding what's coming or what passed. And they start to want to talk, and it might be initially for their own desires and not a social thing. But at some point, it does turn into, hey, you're kind of useful. And parents hate that. They're like, I don't want to feel like I'm used. I'm like, but initially, that is what the beginning of communication is. I want something, so I'm going to use it. And then at some point, it's like, it's kind of fun sitting here with you and talking to you. And then it's like, that's the beginning of the social aspect. Like one of the biggest markers for, there's, you know, way in the back when autism was 1 in 10,000, what was common in all the kids was the minute they could walk, they would leave the room. Sad for the families because they just knew something was not going right. And especially if the other kids who were dying to be on their laps and stuff. And then they had the one kid who would walk out of the room and they were like 3 years old. And so I used to use that as a marker when people are talking. And if the kid came in and just plopped himself down and just looked around, whether they had language or not, that interaction was super meaningful and big deal because that kid wanted to be with parents, wanted to be with people. And I always say that is like, I can't really teach it. I can kind of build it up, you know, and then, but at some point when the kids would do that, I would be like, this is a huge milestone. He wants to hear whether he can talk and interact vocally or not. He's so happy to be there with his parents, with his siblings, with, you know, people. And, you know, autism is a social delay, you know, it's a social disorder, you know, it's not functional. So that I always use that as a milestone still when that kid comes and wants to be there. And then we can talk about what they're doing when they're there with you, you know, that's the other thing. But there is just like, it slowly builds up. You have to be patient. It's really hard. But if your child is mending, there's a lot of hope there. And that's what you need to cling on to. There's a lot of, you know, skill that's going to come and you keep encouraging it and keep reinforcing it. And that is the part of ABA that makes it, I think, really effective.
Yeah. And please don't expect that to all come from speech. It won't. It just, that's not what they're trying to accomplish in that half hour, even hour and a half that you're getting a week of speech. If you're interested in getting ABA, want to encourage you to look and see who the local ABA providers are. Obviously, I love me some CARD. They're the ones who gave me my child back. And of course, Evelyn works for CARD. You can go to centerforautism.com to find out if they're anywhere near you. I also want to say too, that if they aren't, or if you just want to get some more information about some of the lessons that we're talking about, Skills Global and IBT, which is the Institute for Behavioral Training, sends me a weekly thing to let me know what their free options are for you guys. So this week for ABA parents and guardians, it says we will continue our free IBT parent e-learning course, Parent Useful Strategies for Your Home. So if you want to know more things about how to make things work at home, they're offering free video trainings. Normally there's a cost associated with these, but they're offering them free this week. Parent Useful Strategies for the Home. For the educator community, and you can tell your teachers, your child's teachers about this, they're offering their free IBT educator e-learning modules, Educator Impact on the Classroom, and they're offering those to teachers for free at no charge. I'm going to give you a phone number in a minute for your teacher to call. They are also continuing to offer their Registered Behavior Technician 2.0 training course. That's what beginning therapists, the course that they learn, it's about a 40-hour online program before they go on to get their certification. They're offering that free for our parent audience on a case-by-case basis. You have to call and ask them for it. Say that you're friends and you're in the Friends and Family program with Shannon. And then in addition, they are giving a 10% discount on all skills products for anyone that says that they saw us here. And the phone number to call, are you ready for this? It's 877-975-4559. Again, that's 877-975-4559. Now, many of you have written to us and said you're out of the country, and that's not an easy thing for you to do. So they've also included an email this week, training@ibehavioraltraining.com. That's training@ibehavioraltraining.com. And that is what we hear from the folks at Skills and IBT this week. With your permission, Evelyn, I'm going to move on to the next question. Good morning. Can ABA provider provide kids an instructional aid or school shadow during online school this year if they are already getting ABA therapy with CARD? This is like the question of the day. Does the ABA have to sign a contract with the school district, or is that through your medical insurance? His teacher said she was going to look into the possibility of an instructional aid. I remember during our intake, the lady told me they might be able to help with an instructional aid and school shadows in the school for academics, but not in the home. What my son is having therapy for. Maybe the school might be able to provide one, but I rather than have ABA experience, so I thought I'd ask about how that works.
Okay, where do they live? That's the big question.
Yeah, if you can write in and tell us what state you're in, and even potentially what school district, I will share that with Evelyn. I don't necessarily need to share that with the world, but it really,
It varies.
Sort of, right?
Yeah. So in the US, if you're in the US, you have what's called FAPE, free and appropriate education. Okay. So every child is guaranteed that. And, that's the beginning of this. If you have health insurance funding, your health insurance funding has medical guidelines, medical necessity guidelines. And that funding is for medical necessity. And that means it must, whatever your CARD person is working on, their ABA person has to work on things related to the core symptoms of autism. And it has to be from the medical viewpoint. They should not be using that type of funding for anything academic, because then that would belong to the school district. And what we try to talk to families is there is some overlap. Let's say if you have problem behaviors, if your child's having a meltdown and tantrums, it's going to affect school learning and it's going to affect medical necessity guidelines because the safety of your child is in jeopardy. So there are a few things that overlap, but for the most part, you need to work with your ABA person to figure out what are the goals that they've set. Because there are school IEP goals and then there are your medical necessity goals. And depending on the funding is what you can use the therapy for. And some schools have been, we work with some districts where they're like, no, you can, we want your CARD person there and we fund CARD and to be there with our child, your child through Zoom or the internet, through classes, to still prompt and all of that. But the thing is, a lot of schools have specifics like, yeah, you can't be in the home because they don't want the liability of having somebody at home. And so they're saying you can help, but you have to do it through Zoom. And in the same way, some insurance with medical parity, insurance can't limit where a service is happening if they're giving medical necessity, because if a person is diabetic, you can't say that they can't have their insulin when they're in the school setting. So that's an aspect of on the medical side. So you really have to work with your BCBA to see what the goals are for academics and what are that the school's given and what they're approving, and then what is given on the medical necessity side. That said, we have had some schools come to us and say, you cannot be there, to support school. We don't care. And it's because they're afraid that they're going to sue, because at some point if you can say, hey, my child did so well this year because CARD came and supported me and all their academics are way ahead, that means the school didn't give a free and appropriate education because the parents or someone was paying for that. And so then it becomes a legal issue about did the school give what the child needed? And that becomes the big discussion that schools, they want to have some control over that through their IEP process and all of that. So if you have a district that does fund for ABA, for paraprofessionals there with you in school and all of that, that's where you need an advocate to kind of walk you through the process. If you are in a CARD office where the person at CARD is telling you, yes, we have people in your district, there is another way sometimes. Like we have some really good relationships with school districts where we just call them and say, hey, this person came in, we're going to recommend that they need somebody at school. Like, let's start talking about this. And, we have some of those discussions, but it really does vary according to state and according to district. And, do they have their own ABA in their district, that they're trying to give? And then the coordination and the collaboration involved is really important. But there is a way to do this. It's just what we say is go to your district. If your district is saying, hey, Zoom is not working, my child cannot learn with the therapist on the other end, you need to try it, show that it doesn't work, go to the district and say, hey, this is not working. I need the person in my home. And, I need that person with my child there physically to be able to prompt him to pay attention and this, whatever the need may be. And then that's the discussion that the school needs to have with you about what your child needs in order to have instruction during this very weird COVID time.
This very weird COVID time. Now they have written back in and said that they're in Northern California. So I just want to, on Mondays, we, obviously we didn't have her this week because it was Labor Day. But on Mondays, we have Bonnie Yates with us to answer legal questions that have to do with education. She's a educational, special education lawyer is what she is. And she's with the Tollner Law Offices, and they have offices in Northern California. So they handle cases in Northern California. It doesn't mean that you necessarily need to put a lawyer on retainer, but I always say, it'll take you at least a half an hour to fill out the paperwork to get the free half-hour consultation. It'll be worth your time. Just sit and say, what are my options right now? And they'll give you a plethora of options. And you may decide to retain a lawyer, or you may just take the information and do exactly what Evelyn said, but have your ducks all in a row to talk to your school district. But since Bonnie's law firm is where you are, I would wholeheartedly recommend having a conversation with her about what you're going through. She talks about it on the show all the time, that it's like the wild, wild west right now. School districts do not know what to do. No one was prepared for this. They're trying to figure out what to do for the general population, let alone what to do with special education. And in some cases, families are getting the kitchen sink. All they have to do is raise their hand and have documentation and say, we're not getting education. Here's what we'd like. And school districts in some cases are giving it to them. In other cases, they're not. It just depends. But I would recommend having a conversation with them. And that's Tollner, Tollner law firm. If you don't mind Googling, I can't think of what the email or the website is right now. We're saying hi to Raja. Hello, hello, hello. Hi, can you share some ideas on how to teach retell? After I read my son a story and ask him to retell, he only gives some nouns or action verbs that are involved in the story. And thank you very much.
There's a lot of skills to retelling, and there is, it's not only words, but it's the auditory memory aspect too. And you have to remember that all our kids, they're learning to speak is almost like learning another language. That's what it is. So like when I go to Hong Kong, I grew up speaking Cantonese, but when I have this weird delay. People talk to me and then there's this kind of pause and then I can respond. And the longer I'm there, the faster my fluency goes. And people always comment, they'll in stores and shops, they'll just be like, where are you from? Because you can speak, but it's just a weird delay that happens. And it's because I just am not as fluent as English. And so I always tell parents, when you're talking about retelling something, there's a lot of elements in it. Because some of our kids do have some type of auditory memory processing delay where you have to give them some time to kind of get it all through their system. And if you wait a little bit longer, they're able to retell it. But if you ask too soon, it's very difficult. But that's a portion of the population. Not everybody has a delay. But also, the words that he's picking up to tell you may be the only words that he really understands. You know, earlier I talked about concrete versus abstract concepts. And a lot of times our kids know the concrete, no problem. Car is amazingly concrete, right? Because they get in it and they play with it and there's all these things. But getting a little bit more abstract is color, because a cup can be blue, but also a car can be blue, and my shirt can be blue. And if they don't know what a shirt, a car, or a cup is, they're going to be really confused. So, you know, but it's like the first aspect. And once they get color, then we're talking about things that are dependent on variables such as propositions, spatial information. I can say this is behind my computer, but if I move my computer, it might be in front of my computer now. You know, and so just learning that spatial aspect. And I would actually, when you read to your child and he repeats back the words, I actually would write down what those words are. And I would say, like, what words isn't he retelling? Because it gives you an idea of his understanding of those words. He's probably repeating all the words that he knows for sure. They're fluent, they're easy to, you know, bring out of memory, you know, no problem. But I would look at what all those other words are, because that probably gives you an idea of how fluent or how much he understands what those words are. And then putting it together, you know, is also an issue. But retelling, and sometimes our kids, like when they get to the point, you know, we work on conversation and retelling's hard, it's hard. And finally they get to the point where they can tell me, I've had a kid tell me, why do you want me to retell this? Because you were here with me.
And doesn't that make sense? Yeah.
I always say ABA kids are a little bit confused about questions because we ask them questions that we know the answer to already. So there's a report in ABA programming where I work with supervisors and saying, okay, you really need to teach them what questions are, gain information, and it's not just to repeat what you already know. And going between that aspect to really understanding what a question is for, the kids get so confused. But you've been asking me my name for like a year, and you know, and
right,
you know, and then and then that's, you know, and that gets in the whole perspective taking, right? Because, and you're telling them, like, I was asking your name because I want to make sure you knew your name. I didn't know your name. You know, it was just, I needed to make sure that you could respond. And then they're like, oh, okay. And then there's like a host of other questions that come. But initially, you know, ABA does, you know, make the understanding of what a question is for a little bit skewed. But once you get them to the point where they understand that they can ask a question that they don't know, that they need information on, and a lot of times it's usually has to do with their schedule coming. They want to know what's coming. And if just by doing that, that is helpful. But recalling information, I mean, I remember being blown away by this kid that's like, why are you always, like, all you people are constantly asking me things that you already know? And I was like, oops, okay, I need to, you know, be able to go back. So there's different reasons, but initially take down notes on the words that he is repeating back to you. Look at the, you know, words that he's not repeating and figure out like how fluent they are for him, how easy it is for him to use those words.
I love it. Okay, so I don't know that this is the first time that this has happened, but somebody's offering you a job. So, hi, I'm a BCBA at an agency in California. We provide home services and no school services. Is Evelyn open to be referred to families? Evelyn has a job and she's over busy. I know, I wish we could clone her, right? Wouldn't that be the best? But you know, I don't know how you want to respond to that, Evelyn, but I know a lot of the work that you've done over the years exists in skills. That Evelyn has taken a lot of her knowledge and put it into skills. And we already gave you the number for skills.
And if you're a BCBA, there's the card model book.
Yes.
That might be a good book or resource for you to be able to, you know, read and just kind of understand the thinking behind teaching and learning with, because in BCBA programs, they teach you a lot about how to handle challenging behaviors, but there still is not a lot of teaching on what development is and how just the skill acquisition portion of learning. So it's encourage the BCBA to spend some time. You know, like I always tell the new BCBAs that come in, you probably haven't had a child development class since like your freshman year of college. It's time to go back and really look at what development is, because we at CARD, we do use that model to a degree. We use development, but then we actually say, okay, here's the symptomology for what autism is. These are the symptoms, and then we go accordingly. So even though like a beginning skill for a lot of, for babies is like eye contact, you know, joint attention for that first year, that's a really hard skill to teach. So we might start with simple eye contact, but maybe joint attention won't come because the act of sharing is such a complicated skill. We may not work on the sharing aspect till they have some language and have some desire for social interaction. So the second part of it may come later. But really, that's what a lot of behavior analysts have told us. When they come to CARD, they're very surprised at how much development plays. I always say all our kids go through development, but the timing, it might be off. You know, it might come later, it might be a shorter period, but they still go through a lot of the aspects of development.
Wonderful. People, there's so much love for you on the chat, saying that you're amazing. And somebody said, amazing. My cousin is severely autistic and he shows me a new vision. We can chill and play with a light bright. And they say, love you, cousin Peter. So that's a wonderful thing. Somebody else wants to know, how do you differentiate ADHD with autism? This is a very good question.
Yeah, because up until 2015, you could not diagnose the two together. Because the way that we used the analogy we used to use was, if you go into the doctor's office and you have bronchitis, the doctor is not going to diagnose a cough also, because cough is being a part of the bronchitis. And so we used to use that element where kids that have ADHD that couldn't pay attention, you know, couldn't focus, you know, long enough to actually learn in the way that we would say, we're not going to say your attention deficit is there, because we're just going to say the higher or more complicated diagnosis would be autism. You know, that's what it is. In 2015, there was a realization in that DSM that you could have both. And they're very rare that where it's like, I see kids, like I've seen kids over the years, and I know the kids that had, you know, even back when they said you couldn't diagnose this way, I was like, no, this kid is seriously ADHD. Like, and autism, there's two components. Because a lot of times ADHD, there's really specific criteria that you have to meet for ADHD. And it's attention, not only attention deficit, but it's, you know, the hyperactivity or without hyperactivity. But there's also like, there's some interesting ways of diagnosing. Like a lot of ADHD can pay attention to video screens, but they cannot pay attention to anything else. But video screens is, for whatever reason, is an exception. And with autism, both all of attention is your which is your executive function skills. So with autism, there are a lot of executive function dysfunction issues too, where you can't pay attention, or your memory is delayed, or there's some kind of processing, or you don't understand what's important. You know, people used to always ask these things. And I used to always say, like, if you're looking at what I used to do was, it was my own mini assessment, and there's no research behind this at all. But if I had an ADHD kid come in, all I did was have to ask them like about friends and things. They totally understood what that was. But if I asked a kid with autism about friends, it was, you could tell either it was rote or they didn't really understand what friendships were. And that was, for me, was like kind of like the easy, like unscientific researched way of knowing, like, okay, there's a lot of autism in this, when you had to choose one or the other. Now that the ability for both, but like there's, with the onset of ABA being effective for autism, there are funding sources now that are starting to understand that ABA helps people with ADHD too. And like, I've actually had quite a few ADHD, peer-only ADHD patients, and usually they were the siblings of my ASD kids. And it was really interesting for me because It was like trying to get them to focus. They understood why they had to focus, but getting them to do it was very difficult. And a lot of ADHD kids actually do have social issues. It's not the understanding of the social issue. It's like when they can't pay attention long enough to have a conversation or to share some kind of enjoyment with somebody, it's hard to develop friends because people feel, that, because you can't pay attention to me, I'm going to go do something else, with someone else. And so there are actually a lot of social issues that come into play with ADHD kids also. It's just that the basic understanding of what being social is all there. It's just putting it into action is very difficult because they're not attending long enough.
And just because I can't not, I just want to say to people, if you are seeing your child and you're wondering ADHD or you're seeing a lack of focus, I just want to encourage you to start looking at the studies that the first one that came out in 2011, showing that the amount of pesticides in your child's system is directly related to that lack of attention and an inability to focus. And then you will be like the rest of us and start to, there's no way to have no pesticide in a person's diet at this point, but to try to get it, excuse me, as low as possible. And then you will find yourself wanting to know what the dirty dozen are, which are the 12 things that you this year, and it changes every year, the 12 things that you will not eat unless they're organic because they're covered in pesticide. And the clean 15, which gets longer every year, they add things to it, things that you can totally buy conventional. You don't have to buy them organic because the minimal pesticides, if any, are used even when they grow it conventionally. But getting your child, as clean of pesticides as possible is something that I definitely think people should at least look at. Look at the studies, because I poo-pooed it. I was like, I just don't think that that's a thing. And then when I did the research, it was like, whoo, I won't go into the whole thing right now, but when you understand that pesticides are a neurodisruptor, I thought pesticide, it means it kills the bugs. It isn't. They're neurodisruptors. And what they do is they disrupt the bug's ability for its brain to talk to its arms and legs. And what it does is if given a certain amount of pesticide, it makes the bug's legs and arms move a lot so that they're too busy to concentrate to eat and they die of starvation. That's what pesticides do to bugs. And if they give more, what happens is they move so much that it locks up and then they can't move their arms and legs and they die of starvation. And when you know that and you go, we are allowing this to get put into our children's diets, and we are shocked that so many kids have ADHD and that they can measure the amount of pesticide in their urine and it correlates to them demonstrating more behaviors, you go, oh, I think I'm going to lower the pesticide in my child's diet. Start looking 2011. That's when the first study came out. Also, people are saying, 2 people just ordered the book. They were like, I didn't know there was a book. Apparently, I have not talked about the book.
Can I say one thing about the ADHD?
Yes.
If you have a child and you're trying to figure out if they're ADHD or ASD, I'd encourage you to just go and get an evaluation. We do have a lot of families who it's easier to take the diagnosis of ADHD than it is to take diagnosis of ASD, but early intervention is the key. So the earlier you find out if there is something more severe going on, the better your child will do an intervention and with every development. We have too many families who they think ADHD and then they get to school age where it becomes an issue in school. And they might think that there might be something else going on, but they don't get an evaluation. They just kind of like hope it's ADHD. And they come in like at 7 or 8 and then it's like a full disruption on school. And, even though we can still help at that older age, we can do a lot more if they come in younger. And early intervention really is effective. And I know it's so hard for a family to get that kind of diagnosis, but if you have any qualms on one or the other, just go and try to get an evaluation and find out what it really is and then decide what you're going to do about it.
Okay. Somebody wants to know what foods have pesticides. Almost everything has some level, right? Anymore in our world, but depending on where they're certified organic, you should be looking at significantly less pesticides. But as I said, there's a dirty dozen and a clean 15 list. The first thing I would do is you can Google it, dirty dozen, and it will tell you what the 12 foods are this year that the most pesticides are used on. And it changes a little bit every year, but a good rule of thumb is if it's something where you eat the skin of the fruit or vegetable, it's more likely to have pesticide on it. If it's something where you're having to peel it and then eat it, less pesticide, right? And every year it depends on like what's happening in the crops. There might be one year when there's like a particular pesticide that's eating through things, and so they use more pesticides. So it does change every year. And then you can look at the clean 15, and there are things that you don't have to buy organic. It's perfectly safe to eat them otherwise. Okay, this is probably the last question, and then I have a comment towards the end. But somebody wants to know how fast does a 2.4-year-old boy recover who's currently saying his first word?
Hey, you know what? I can't guarantee the progress of any child, but if he actually vocalizing his first words and he's 2.5, it can happen. The fastest I think it's happened for me is like by preschool. Like we're at the end of preschool, we're done. We actually do transition into kindergarten to make sure things are in place, and then we're gone. We have a lot of those kids that do the 2 to 5, 2 to 6-year-old in and out. That's full 40 hours and intensely working on it. And then
40 hours a week.
40 hours a week.
40 hours
yes.
of quality ABA a week done by therapists, and then family doing more after that. I just want to be clear.
Yes, and full collaboration with schools, working with the school, allowing aides in, allowing, just the whole discussion. And so I've had many kids. I've had my first doctor recovery kid started at 2, 1 or 2 months, and she finished. We rolled her right into kindergarten, made sure she was okay, and then we were gone. And to this day, she has no idea, and she actually is in this field and has no clue. And the parents have just chosen. And when she was around 7 or 8, because I would go in at holidays and just say hi, she was like, "Why don't you come play with me anymore?" And I was like, "Own friends, you don't need it." And she was like, "Oh, okay." And that's all it was. And then we have other kids who come in at 2, and maybe their things get complicated, and then they leave around 7 or 8, if we're on the recovery end. We had a kid who was completely nonverbal, and we actually had to use PECs, which is using icons to talk, device and everything. And then at some point, he kicked, and he was probably 5 or 6 at that point. But once his visual memory kicked in school, he learned how to read, and the structure of it was helpful. Then, we stayed with him till he was 10. Everybody has their own path. And that's what I would encourage you the most is, it can be done pretty quickly. I wouldn't rush it, but I would say put in the hours, the intensity of good quality ABA, plus all the caregiver follow through that happens, and you might have a good outcome. And it might not be within what you wanted, but it could be too. We don't know, but put it in, there's a lot of great outcomes.
There we go. I want to thank you so much. I'm going to leave with one, because we've had 2 questions in the last, today and last night come in. Apparently on the doctors, they reran an episode recently that featured MERT. And so we've had people writing in and asking for opinions. And I just want to say, I don't have an opinion yet, but I really want to encourage people to go read what John Elder Robeson has written about going through it as an adult. For those of you who don't know MERT, it's I just want to get it right. It's magnetic e-resonance therapy, where they use very high-powered magnets on the brain. We've had adults on the spectrum writing in and saying they're very concerned about how much this is being talked about. I do want to caution everyone that of the 2 people that I know that have done it, both of them have had some pretty negative, impactful things happen. They can speak to the fact that they, whether it was worth it for them or not, but that there were some negative things. And so I really want to caution parents that you not do this with your child unless you have done, a lot more research than what I know about. So I just want to put that out there. But if you're curious about it, look up John Elder Robeson. He's a very famous author, individual on the autism spectrum, and he wrote very eloquently about why he chose to do it and what it was like for him. I would start there. Anyway, Evelyn, I thank you so much for being here with us always. Somebody just wrote in, does skills help parents teach their kids? It gives you the curriculum of what to teach your kids. It's pretty brilliant. And Ev, a substantial portion of your life's work has been poured into it. What Ev knows, it's like they tried to crack her head open and go, Ev, can you pour that in here to this program? Am I wrong?
Some version of that.
So anyway, so check that out, skillsforautism.com. But anyway, thank you so much for being with us and answering our questions. We appreciate you. I know you have things you have to go to, so much love to you. And please make sure you convey our happy birthdays.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. And guys, we're back tomorrow. And tomorrow, I'll try to have the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15 for you. But we're also having David Zimmerman on the show tomorrow. He is from a wonderful show called Meet the Biz and has been instrumental in a wonderful movie called Honey Bunny that we're going to talk about. And he is working on inclusion in the entertainment industry in a way that I don't think anybody else is. So we're going to talk with him tomorrow, and that's going to be super duper fun. He knows lots of the famous people and interviews them a lot. So, which is a very fun thing. He just did interview Julie Newmar, who most of you are too young to know, but Julie Newmar was Catwoman on the Batman show. And like, it was so exciting to see him interview Julie Newmar. So anyway, we'll catch up. And yesterday he just interviewed Kobe Bird from Lock and Key, who we love here on the show. So we'll talk with him about that tomorrow. That's tomorrow. Until then, give your kiddos a hug from me and one for you too. Bye-bye for now.
The advice and opinions expressed by the host of Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. The Center for Autism and Related Disorders advises working with a board-certified behavior analyst who has experience with autism before starting any intensive behavioral intervention. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
Good morning and welcome to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod. We're coming to you live from different places around Southern California this morning. Different mornings, it's different places around the world. But this morning, we're all pretty much Southern California based. But thrilled to be here with you guys. I love a 3-day weekend. I don't know about the rest of you. I love when we get to, break up the routine and have other things. But then it's always harder, isn't it? It's just, this week has just been so hard for me to get back on track after having a 3-day weekend. Anybody else? Raise your hand if that is you as well. But thrilled to be, I like the routine. I'm like a lot of our kids that the routine, I work better in the routine, but I do like to change it up a little bit. I get bored easily. I don't know, I'm guilty as charged. But I do like getting back in the routine, and I miss you guys when I'm not here. Can I just say that I miss having these conversations? And I do mean that, which leads me a lovely little segue to the fact that this whole show is meant to be interactive. We love to hear from you. We love to know your questions, your thoughts, your concerns. You got a gripe. I mean, this is a safe space. Honestly, feel free to write in. So let's talk about some of the different ways that you can connect with us. We are live right now on YouTube, Facebook, Periscope, and Twitter. And you can write into us and we're also live on our homepage. I forgot to say that, autism-live.com. You can write into us on any of those platforms. I will tell you the most convenient when we're live, the most likely that you will get your comment read and discussed is if you write in on YouTube or Facebook. It's just the way it's working right now. So if you really want to get a question answered or a comment discussed, then I would suggest YouTube or Facebook. Go on there and get your comment in. Early is better. And but if you're not watching us live, you're probably watching us on iTunes, where we are a free download, and you can download either the full picture and sound or just sound, audio only. We also podcast to Spotify, Deezer, Ghana, iHeartRadio. I'm sure I'm forgetting other things. We got a couple more coming. And by the way, you can also watch us recorded on YouTube. In fact, all of the shows that we've been doing, we are this week, I think, officially cresting 10 years of doing regular live shows. 10 years, my friends. And there's a lot of videos. We've covered a lot. We have not covered it all. We still have work to do, but we've covered a lot of different topics. If you want to go back and search topics, you can. I would suggest you either do that on our homepage, autism-live.com, or on YouTube. That's where most things are. On YouTube, we take the whole show and then we'll cut it into little segments so that you don't have to find a whole show and you can search by topic. I will tell you that YouTube is not aggregating some of our videos right now, but they will. We had to do some more paperwork with them, and we'll be back with all of that. But 10 years worth of videos, my friends, of things to search. And so sometimes, we have multiple experts explaining something. So sometimes you listen and you go, okay, well, that's Dr. Grandpichet's explanation, and I sort of get it. So now I want to go over here and I want to hear what this doctor says about it. Now I want to listen to this doctor, and amidst all of that, you'll get your answer in a way that it resonates with you. So please check those out. It's free. And by the way, while we're talking about that, we encourage you, we want to be free in as many places as we can. If we're not someplace where you like to get your podcast, please let us know. And we will apply to have, as long as it's free to the viewers, we will apply to try to have our podcast there. Because we like for as many people as possible to get this information, and the hope and the information and inspiration is what we always say is our mission is. But I also want to tell you, we don't have a marketing budget. We just don't. And that's not what we do. So we rely on you to tell other people, if you like what you see here, if you want to share it with other people, there's lots of different ways that you can help us out with that. You can like us on Facebook. You can follow us. You can give us a review on iTunes. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can just do a post about us. You could do a watch party right now on Facebook if you wanted to, and invite people and say, hey, I think you might like this. Obviously that you don't have to in order to be here and enjoy this, but that is a way that you can help other people to know and help us to continue to do what we do. But we appreciate you being here, because that also helps us. And please write in and chat with us. I've said to you sometimes in the last couple of weeks, man, I need you. Like, write in. It helps to ground me when I know you guys are there and you're listening and you're here. And I love hearing your stories of how you are doing. We always say that this show is for the very large autism community. So that starts with individuals who are on the spectrum. They are the beating heart of that community. And of course, that starts with them. So we welcome individuals who have a diagnosis and are here looking for support and help and inspiration, right? But we also include in our community all the people who love those people, right? I'm one of those people. I have a son who was diagnosed at the age of 2.5. And through being a part of this community, I now have so many friends who are on the spectrum and who I absolutely adore and love. And like all of you, I believe that those individuals have all the rights to all the things that we all enjoy. And I want to fight and help and support to make sure that they get them. That means respect, dignity, the right to vote, right? Yeah, get me all excited. A safe place to live, a great job, the ability to make a paycheck and to have at least the ability to have gainful employment, because not necessarily to fully support yourself, that isn't everybody's goal, right? But to have gainful employment, see, I'm all emotional already, but plus many more things about how about the right to a relationship and to be who you are and love who you love, right? All of those things. I'm very passionate about that. And I know that if you love someone on the spectrum, you are also passionate about that. We can disagree about absolutely everything else or some of it, but we have that at least in common. Okay, so I like to remind you at the start of the show, we have lots of experts on the show. I'm not one of them. I already told you my credential. I'm a parent and I care. And I used to be a school teacher, so that helps a little bit. And I used to teach college too, that helps a little bit. So, and I have a sense of humor. These are my credentials. And I want to bring all of that to you and share that with you and have you share all the things that you bring to the table. Anyway, we like to start Thursdays with something we fondly refer to as the jargon of the day. This is when we take on one word, one phrase, one acronym. We try to figure out what in the hey nunny nunny are those experts talking about? What does this have to do with us? How can this save us time, energy, and money, right? And so what we do is we first give you the actual definition, and then often we make fun of it when possible. And then we give you a working definition and try to give you an example of why this should be a part of your day in your life. So today's term is functional pretend play. I talk about play a lot on the show because I think that play is one of the safest places to learn. And that when we give someone the skills to be able to play, because here's the deal, kiddos on the spectrum, sometimes they don't want to play because to them it's work. And we'll talk more about that in a second. But when we give someone the skills to play so that they can get their way to the enjoyment of play, we find that they have less anxiety, they have more flexibility, and they are more willing to try things, which then leads to learning. So and they're not as afraid to fail either, which is part of that flexibility. So today's term is functional pretend play, which there's nothing like taking good old play and whittling it down into some really boring terms, right? So helpful. But if your child isn't playing, you know, and you go, I just don't understand why that, or you go, my child isn't engaged in creative play or imaginative play, then we need to go and look at the steps and go, well, gee, are they doing functional pretend play first? And then we'll add on to it. So let's take a look at what the actual definition of functional pretend play. Can we make play boring? Using lifelike objects in a purely functional, socially conventional way to imitate or act out common action sequences. Okay, this isn't the worst definition that there is, but man, have we taken play and whittled it down to something really academic. Lifelike objects in a purely functional, socially conventional way. I don't know about you, but the first time I saw that, I was like, what is a functionally social? That like kind of makes my, you know, I mean, I'm just like, what is, I hate the whole idea of socially conventional. So to imitate or act out common action sequences. Let's take a look at our working definition and see if we can't find something that your average person would be like, okay, I get it. Playing with toys that are lifelike in a lifelike way. So this is that when we remember when we used to have toy stores that were giant and huge in warehouses, and now instead we have these mom and pop toy stores that are really cool. But in the warehouse ones, there was always one aisle that was devoted just to functional pretend play. And I never used to understand that aisle. Totally get it now. Totally get it now. But it's the aisle that has all the play kitchens, and it has the play cash registers, and it has the play vacuum cleaners, right? And I used to think, you know, this is what's wrong with the world, is that they have toy vacuum cleaners. And so men grow up and think that women want vacuum cleaners for a birthday gift. Because let me just tell you, men, we don't. there's a big joke in our household, in the culture of our household, that my husband was going to get me a crock pot for a Christmas present. I told him if he ever got me, because you know those Instapots, I know some of you are so excited with your Instapot, but to me, it's a crock pot. It just does more than a crock pot. I get it. Don't start the hate mail yet, but it is not a gift for the mom in the house. It might be a gift for the house, but it is not an appropriate Christmas gift or birthday gift for me. And my son on the spectrum understood that, but my husband did not. And I told him, you get me one of those crock pots and it's over between us. I will get you socks for every birthday from now on. And he was like, okay, we're never doing that. But why do we have a functional pretend play aisle? Why is it good for our kiddos, and especially for our kiddos on the autism spectrum? Because one of the most important skills to have when you are a child is to be able to imitate. Because if you can imitate what someone else is doing, the learning is on, right? If a child can't imitate, then we have to go back and teach imitation. And we have to key them into the people in their lives enough to care about imitating. And sometimes that is a huge task, but we do it through play sometimes. So if you think about it, you know, some of you will write in and say that your kids have food selectivity. And that's a really hard thing to work on. Totally workable, but it's a really hard thing to work on because you find yourself sitting with the food and then there's the smells and the textures and there's the cost of it if they don't eat it. And there's all these emotions that go into it. Sometimes it's better to remove that and go over here and not have it be with the cost and the smell and the, you know, the fear of we're going to throw this food away, and play with pretend food. And let's, you know, be in a pretend kitchen and we're going to make a pretend sandwich out of pretend bread and pretend cheese. There's no smell. Nobody's actually going to chew anything. We don't have to worry about textures. We're just going to play. But we make a sandwich and then we put it back down on the plate, and it's, you know, and it's a way that we have of working on the social aspect of eating so that we're not getting behind on that while we're working on the other stuff that's actually happening with the food at the table, right? That's just one example. And I still am a little iffy on the vacuum cleaner, but for some kids, and I got to be honest, my kid was one of these kids, he was focused on the vacuum cleaner. I think now in retrospect, looking back on it, that for him, he was very into machines, not people. And he wanted to know what the inside of every machine looked like. And so if you think about it, here was this machine that came out not often enough, right? But it would come out of like this magic closet. And it was this crazy thing with tubes. And to him, I think he thought it looked like a robot. And it did kind of a magic trick because he could see stuff on the ground and it sucked it up, right? So it was fascinating to him. And he was constantly wanting to turn the vacuum cleaner over. And if he could find a screwdriver, he was trying to take the screwdriver to the vacuum cleaner and take it apart, right? So for him, a play vacuum cleaner probably would have been a good thing so that he could see how we use this is, you know, we go back and forth. I'm still now at this age, at the age of 17, teaching him to go over, because he'll run it, but you know, you can see that it hasn't run all the places, right? So probably would have been a good gift for him as a child. Anything where a child can imitate something that an adult in their life is doing or another child is doing in their life is a beneficial toy. Sometimes we have to reinforce them for doing it. But, you know, I think for a lot of our kids, even though there's a lot going on, there's some level that they get, oh, I'm being like you. I'm doing what you're doing. I actually think video games have helped with this a little bit. I'm a big fan of the Wii U kind of thing and the games where the kids have an avatar. We know that there's a part of the brain that's the mirror neurons where when we're all watching a sport, like a ski jump sport, there's a part of our brain that lights up that is the same part of our brain as if we were doing it. And we know with autism that part of the brain needs to be a little bit more woken up in our kiddos. So anything where they can be imitating somebody, whether it's an avatar or doing functional pretend play, where they're playing with a toy that's, you know, the little cell phone that's a fake phone, good toy. These toys build into other things. Now, why am I wanting to talk about play today? It's September. This is no time to be talking about play. The truth is that I'm working right now, I'm finalizing our toy guide, toy and gift guide for 2020, and having to do it in a different way than we normally do it, because normally we take a room full of toys and we have a bunch of people go at them and play with them, and we watch the kids' reactions, the parents' reactions, the therapists play with them, so on and so forth. I'm not able to do that this year. I'm not able to put everybody in a room together. So I am going to be looking for toy recommendations for you, which leads us to our question of the day. Are you ready for this? Question of the day. What's your favorite toy? Now, this can be a toy that you love or that you loved from your childhood, or a toy that your child loves now or that your child loved when they were younger. What's your top toy? And believe me, you can list more than one, but I want to know, like, what are you in love with? What was fabulous? What was super cool? And if you want to, you can tell us why, but I'm desperate to know what everybody's favorite toy is, because I'm picking winners. If you want to say in this, you got to get in now. A favorite toy is, you know, is a wonderful thing. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a specific toy. It could be a class of toys. Like, I loved my baby dolls. I had a Baby Tender Love, which was probably my favorite doll, but I had many dolls that I absolutely loved. When I asked my son this the other day, he doesn't like to be asked questions about what your favorite is, because he hates having to pick one thing over another. But you know, he can do it. And he kind of hesitated, and he was like, I get Legos. You know, and I definitely think that that's a lot of people's favorite toy. But what is yours? And if you want to specify what's yours and what is your child's favorite toy? Okay, we always have a topic of the week, and since it's been a short week and we really haven't been here very much, we're just introducing it today. So our topic this week is living this life. It's really hard right now, right? Because this life is, we're waiting for this to end. And I just need to send out a cautionary statement to myself and to all of you that this has gone on long enough that we also need to acknowledge that this is, as you know, when we were talking last week with Jay Moore, and he was saying, you know, I said it and he said it. He said, yes, this is the thing. Acknowledging that this too is our lives. We're all waiting to get back to our lives, but this also is our life. And since it has gone on more than 6 months, I think we need to move out of the denial of that. I don't know when this is going to end. It morphs every once in a while, but it is important to not just be marking time. And I'm saying that as much to you as I am saying it to myself. I've given myself a bunch of projects to kind of busy myself through this time, and that's not a bad thing. But I also, you know, really have been thinking about it this week that we'll never get this time back. Nobody's going to hand us back this time and go, oh, sorry, we interrupted your life for 6 months. Here's an additional 6 months. And it looks like we're going to be in some version of this for at least another 6 months. And I know that kind of feels like a stranglehold on your neck, but if that's the case, when we get to we were talking about this last week, the positive assumptive questions, then how can I be happy today? What can I do that's fun today? How can I enjoy today? How can I enjoy my child today? How can I enjoy my time today? That we live this life. And this is a part of our lives right now for the foreseeable future. So I'm seeing a lot of people come to this sort of peace with it and go, okay, so I know that a lot of you put your ABA on hold because you were waiting to come back to something. It's time to come back to now and to figure out what we're doing right now, because 6 months has gone by. And we need to live this life. And your kiddos, your teens, your adults on the spectrum, we need to figure out how to help them to live their life in this moment as well. I know it's a big, deep breath. We're going to be here with you. We're going to be figuring it out too, because I don't have the answers. But I know that if we at least start with asking ourselves one positive assumptive question today, how can I be happy today? How can I enjoy today? What can I do to make myself happy today? What can I do to make my child happy today? What would be a fun thing for my child? One positive assumptive question, and I think that will set us on a path. Set us on a path. Okay, but we got to live this life, the one we've been dealt, right here, right now. Okay, so we've got this amazing guest today, and I'm really excited. It's his first time being on the show with us. We are welcoming David Zimmerman. He is an author, he is an actor, he is a director, a producer. He is a light in the Hollywood community because not only is he doing things in the Hollywood community that are wonderful and fabulous, but he is one of those rare individuals that is also shedding a light on the inclusion community and giving opportunities to folks who have had a little bit of a tougher path to be in the entertainment community, I believe. But Traven, is David already with us? I'm looking to see. If he is there, tell him, go ahead and let him in and welcome him. I got great silence. I guess, is he not with us? Let me check my messages to see if there is an issue. He is there. Okay, great, fabulous. So go ahead and have him start his camera and let's welcome David S. Zimmerman to Autism Live. There he is, David. Hello.
Hello.
It is so good to see you. I was just saying nice things about you behind your back, saying what a light you are in the Hollywood community for various and sundry different reasons. And I mentioned that you are an actor, a director, a producer, a creator. You are an amazing person who really is here on Autism Live. We talk a lot about, we have to get outside the autism community and get people who aren't necessarily a part of our community to see the light and include all of us. And I think you're the embodiment of that, really. You are somebody who has been working in inclusion in Hollywood for how many years? Has this been part of what you do?
I'd say I started almost 25 years ago.
Well, you are way ahead of the curve. You are a scholar and a gentleman, and we should clone you because really, I mean, you're what we're all looking for. Somebody who gets it and who is out there doing what you do, and you're constantly including people who are marginalized and made to feel that they're different and not included, and you're just automatically including them. Without a lot of fanfare, I gotta say too, more people should be talking about what you're doing. So let's make sure we talk about what you're doing. We have so many things to talk about, but let's talk about Meet the Biz first. Tell our audience what Meet the Biz is and how they can participate.
Oh, well, Meet the Biz, I started, quote, Meet the Biz, I'd say in 2008. Although I had been teaching with the Media Access Office for probably 10 years before that. I first got into, quote, the community when I first got to LA. I was waiting tables and I had this wonderful friend, Mary Rings, the head of the Born to Act players. And she said, hey, come to my acting class. Finally got in, opened the door, and there was this beautiful family that I was with as an assistant to Mary for 10 years. And then ultimately, I got to create Meet the Biz, which included all actors. I first started teaching actors with disabilities, but I was thinking, hey, we're all in Hollywood. Let's all do this together. So that's when I started it. And it is about inclusion. And what I love, not just including the people and the actors and the performers and the talent that are in it, but it is by going and connecting with, we were at Inclusion Films, Joey Travolta's Inclusion Films for years, like several years. And we did classes there. And then we moved on and we had we worked with Actors for Autism, Melissa Wolf, and we were under their umbrella, and we did classes at the Writers Guild and the Screen Actors Guild and the Gay and Lesbian Center, Jane Wagner and Lily Tomlin. So we really want to just like, hey, look, it's all about all of us working together. So that's, and of course now we're at Performing Arts Studio West, which is another wonderful family.
So, and for people who've never heard, because you're saying a whole bunch of things that people are like, wait a second, slow down, because I'm sure that I might want to be involved in this.
Yes.
And so Meet the Biz, tell them, because it's a little bit of a lot of different things. It's a class, but it's also a show.
Exactly.
You interview people. Talk about the whole thing.
Well, you know, since we began, they have been classes, at least 3 hours, if not 4 or more hours of classes per session. We bring in people from the industry, like Lainey Kazan would come in and teach a 4-week acting workshop. And you get to, it's not just meeting the people. Some people say, I don't want to just meet people. No. You get to like work with these people. You get to connect with these people. And a lot of times people, you know, I mean, directors, writers, we have Danny Woodburn coming in and teaching improv. We have Charlene Tilton coming in and doing a class. In fact, her and her daughter came in, Cherish Lee, and they did a half acting class, half singing class. Jerry Jewell comes in, does comedy. So you come in and you learn from this. Of course, we're now in quarantine. So now I was asked by John Pace is Performing Arts Studio West. He said, okay, we're going to do online classes. And I was thinking, for me to do a class 5 days a week, looking at the camera and say, okay, put up your hand here. But, you know, I really like to see a couple people and say, okay, try that again. Yes. Now okay. Now, yeah. Now, how are you feeling? I like to really be in depth with people. So I thought, well, hey, I've been doing Meet the Biz. Let's continue it as a talk show, and then sometimes bring people on to ask questions. And sometimes we do a little acting or singing or dancing on the show as well. But it's really connecting people. And the biz, at first I said, Meet the Biz. You know, I wasn't sure I liked the title, but now I love it, because Meet the Biz is not necessarily the people who come on to the show. Which it has really turned into that too, which I love, because you have a plethora of all different kinds of talents. But it's also like when Lainey came in to teach, for example, she said after her first class, she said, can I do this again? I love this. And she was addicted, and she met the biz. You know, yes, they met Lainey, who is in the biz, but she met the biz of all these wonderful actors that were not untouched, I forgot, I can't think of the term, not
uncultivated.
Well, I mean, some have been very cultivated. You could say not used enough. And now as time goes on, and used is not a good word either. It's more of all working together, all getting out there and becoming
undiscovered.
Undiscovered.
There we go. Undiscovered. There we go.
Quarantine brain.
We all have it. I think it's so amazing what you're doing. And I love the fact that it's morphed into something that you can do and continue doing during quarantine. So for our viewers, and we have people we want to shout out. We have people who are watching in Kenya and Nepal this morning.
I love it.
I know. And all throughout the United States and the rest of the world as well. But if they wanted to be able to access Meet the Biz,
yes,
you've been doing some amazing interviews. And I know, you know, I'm a gal of a certain age, and I was freaking out the other day because I saw the interview that you did with Julie Newmar, who still looks stunning. For those of you who don't know, because you're too young, she was Catwoman. When I was a little girl, she was Catwoman. So this woman, and she looks stunning. She is rocking that white hat. Come on. But that's just one of the many interviews. Where can they go to see these, David?
Well, they can go, and these are all for everybody to see on PASW TV, which is on YouTube. So,
Okay.
and when you go there, subscribe to that. You'll see other classes as well that you could take. Now, if you really wanted to get into the Zoom classes, the live ones, then you could connect with Performing Arts Studio West and see how you could work that out to see how you can get a part of that. While we're in quarantine and afterwards as well. But right now you can see all these by going a lot of the interviews, and we come out with 5 a week. I mean, I've done more in the last 6 months, and it's probably to keep me sane in this time by connecting with others like we're doing right at this moment. And every day I get to talk to another friend of mine or somebody who I haven't met before yet become friends with, because again, it's such a small world. I always say it's a little blue marble that we're all on, so we just gotta keep working together.
Well, and you are really good people, and I have to give a shout out to Joey Travolta, because he was the person who said to me, "Why have you never had David Zimmerman on your show?" And I was like, "I don't know. Why have I don't have his contact." And he was like, "Stop it. You need to contact David Zimmerman." And you immediately got back to me. And the more I have learned about you, I'm like, you're amazing. I just want to say that. And, there are some people, look, there's nothing wrong with doing just classes, right? But I got to say, you're also taking that and you're turning it into other things, and you're putting your time and energy and money where your mouth is, as evidenced by some of the other projects that we're about to talk about. Let's talk about Honey Bunny. Tell the folks at home what Honey Bunny is.
Honey Bunny.
It's so wonderful, David. It hurts my heart. It's so wonderful.
Oh my God. Hopefully it heals the heart.
Yes, but I mean, in the best possible way. It's just one of those things. Oh, anyway, so we're going to put up the poster from Honey Bunny, but talk about it for us.
Well, this it actually was a dream come true. Number one, I've known Blair Williamson and his amazing mother, Gail, for probably about 25 years. And I was on the coach on the set on many sets with Blair. And, through the Disability Film Challenge and Nick Novicki, he has, we've at Performing Arts Studio West and Meet the Biz have always had the, hey, it's time for the Disability Film Challenge. We had the meet and the greet every year. Well, Nick kept on saying, let's do a film. When are you going to do a film? Finally, this year, when I heard it was documentary, I went, I'm going to do it this year. So
this is the Easter Seals.
Yes.
Tell them, because for our audience, they may not know about this film challenge. Tell them just a little bit.
Easter Seals Disability Film Challenge. Incredible event every year that Nick Novicki created. And you have a weekend or a few more days, it depends what it is, to create a 5 to 6 minute short. And every year they give you a new assignment. And this year was documentary. And right before you start too, they say, okay, you have to be sure you have these things within this creation, and go. You have 48 hours or 50, whatever hours it is. And then, and this year was amazing because they had, I think, 87 films. People did 87 films. And let me tell you, I watched all 87 and they were all incredible. Incredible. And I mean, you could go online to the Easter Seals Disability Film Challenge and see these. And it was such a joy because automatically I thought, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm Blair Williamson. That's the first person popped in my mind. Now I've been working on footage for this other film that we've been doing for years, but for some reason I thought, no, I want to focus on Blair. And I knew that Blair and Susie have been together for years. And I said, this is what I want to create in a 6-minute love fest, not just for them, but for all of us, because I've noticed that when I watch this film and when we first created it, we have a wonderful director, Jaden Barriel, and what was so great about it is Gail said, I want to introduce you to this amazing family because Jaden has some footage. I myself had some footage. So we collaborated, got to work with his mother, who co-produced it, his father who edited it. And then we have the amazing music of Chris Hendricks and Trevor Baumgartner. And
The
I don't know.
music was beautiful.
Oh my God, Chris is amazing. He's somebody you should have on too. Amazing creator. But we all worked together and it was so effortless. We all did our jobs. I was producing, we had the director, and I wanted the vision my hope was that it was a film that, especially during the times that we're going through right now, people could turn it on. And this is what I did, especially the first and second week after. I'd turn it on every morning and it would take me away. I would be totally with this beautiful love story that I can identify with, something that I would love to have. So that's what I wanted to make, a love story.
And it's beautiful. Tell our audience where they can go to see it, David.
Well, you can go online at YouTube, and you go to the Easter Seals Disability Film Challenge, and you could look it up there. And it's a 5-minute and so many second film, and I think it'll warm your heart. And we're starting to submit to film festivals now. So cross fingers,
It's a beautiful film, and it's very heartwarming. And it's one of those things that, because it's just 6 minutes long, everybody has time in their day to watch it, and it is uplifting. It will lighten your load for the day and remind you. There is something about these two wonderful individuals that you're looking at, and how they're prioritizing their relationship. That's beautiful. That's absolutely beautiful. But I also like that you show that it's not always hearts and flowers and roses for at least a couple of seconds.
Oh yeah.
So that we see that they also face challenges within their relationship. I just think it's a really beautiful, it's good storytelling. And I mean that in the best possible compliment, because that's what I love, is good storytelling. And it is.
Yeah, it does. It definitely has levels to it,
Yeah.
And even like I used to collect soundtrack albums, and my favorite ones are the ones that have so many different levels to it.
Exactly. And I noticed the music, and I was like, this is amazing music. Great job. Not just good job, great job. And I encourage everybody to go and check that out. I want to now go look at the other films, but so I didn't know that Easter Seals did this every year. What time of year do they do this?
Well,
so our audience could be looking out for next year.
Oh yeah, and anybody can join, and create their own work. It usually happens in March, and this year it was pushed because of the pandemic and the quarantine, but they decided to do an in-house kind of thing.
There you go.
But go on, I think it's disabilityfilmchallenge.com, and you could check. And they have all the films there, as well as what you can do to jump in and be in part of the family this next year.
There you go. And we're running out of time, so I want to make sure I get to everything. But you mentioned that you had another project that you've been working on for a while. Talk to us a little bit about My Next Breath.
There you go. It's a project that it's sort of like my baby, and I have been calling it that. It is my extended family. We started it 11 years ago, I think it is, which is a good number, 11. And it's still going. And for a while there, after 3 years, it was just sort of like floating in air. And I said, this has to be. We have gold in there. We have amazing people a part of it. Jerry Jewell. I can list the whole cast, but I can't. Danny Murphy was in it, and I could give you'll have to check out the trailer. But it's a film about stories, the stories that we all have, and what do you want to do with your next breath? Yeah.
Oh, I was just going to say that some of these names may be unfamiliar to people, but we've spent a lot of time on the show showcasing certain people who are individuals who may have an additional challenge, whether it's autism or other things, and they are artists and they want to be in the art world, and that we are of the mindset here on Autism Live that will of course, and they have a right to be whatever they want to be, including in the arts. But a lot of times, if you don't have an extra challenge, it's hard to be an artist in today's world. And when you do have extra challenges, there is a different load to carry that maybe I can't always understand. And so we have people on the show to talk about what the challenges were for them and how they overcame them. And some of it is just, I think, from what I hear, is overcoming the preconceived notion of this idea of disability, that they can't do other things because of a disability.
See, I don't even, I see the person. I don't even think about the disability or quote the disability. We use that term, but I really see the talent that everybody has. And we have, I mean, as we both know, and I've seen your show, and I didn't say this at the beginning, but I've seen your show many times. And when you called me up, I was like, of course, oh my God, I would love to be on her show, and we had on Meet the Biz the other day that we filmed, which is coming out in a week or two, is Kobe Bird.
Love Kobe Bird.
You're gonna love the interview. It's
I know,
fun.
I will.
It's fun.
He's amazing. But the reason why I said at the beginning, we need to clone you, David, is because I do think that is the way you operate, is that you're not looking for that. You're looking at the individual. But I think that Jerry Jewell is a perfect example that for people who may not know her, I mean, the first time I was ever introduced to Jerry Jewell was when she was on The Facts of Life a million years ago. And she came on in crutches and was a character on the show. And I remember going, what's happening? This is so incredible. I don't think this girl is acting being on the crutches. I think that this is the way she motors. And I was raised by a mom who was on crutches. So for me, that was a moment in time. And then, of course, Jerry went on to be a brilliant stand-up comedian. But I can't even imagine the challenges that she faced the first time she went to a casting call, when people were like, do you understand that you're here, to audition for something?
Well, she was like, as you know, she's just a powerhouse. And my gosh, Norman Lear and Fern Field discovered her, put her on that show. And then she has, done, she literally, talk about my next breath, she has breathed life into me to keep going. And of course, Deadwood, she was on that for 3 years. She is a true and consummate artist and actress.
Yes. But a pioneer. That has to be said, exactly. A pioneer, because she made it possible for people to stop and go, why not? Why not?
Exactly.
Absolutely. Why not?
Talk about a star. she is a star, and you see, sometimes you see people on the Star of the Walk of Fame and you go, who? But talk about it. Who needs a star? But we won't get into that. But
I'll petition for that. Absolutely. So you're focusing in My Next Breath on a lot of different actors who probably have a different story than a lot of what people have heard in life. But I think probably some of the most inspirational stuff there is.
Well, it's inspirational in the sense that we can identify with it. The people watching it can say, wow, that reminds me of me, or I've had a story like that, bringing us all together, saying, we might have a little differences, but we have differences and similarities. And that's what I love when I'm creating work and casting. I love bringing in everyone. I love working with artists and talent.
But David, how do we make it so that everyone thinks like you do?
I don't know. I just think about it. I just do it. I'm all about love. I can't, you know, all this, you know, this hatred or negative stuff that's going on in the world. I'm like, what? Come on, people. Look, you know, take a breath, listen to the heart, and look at the amazing beauty that's all around us. And I believe that that is what's going to save us all, is to really feel the heart of us all, because we're all here together. I really just see the positive, I guess, and see the creative geniuses that we have right under our noses. And for those who have been afraid or who are afraid of differences, no. It's just a little shift of the beauty of it all, the beauty of all of our differences and our similarities.
Well, and I think for our audience who's watching, I think that there's a certain amount of it that we get, but if you want to be able to see people who have already made that shift, that pivot, and are doing, instead of talking about why can't we, who are already in the process of doing and have left that behind, you know, then I would suggest that you follow what David is doing. We didn't really talk about, My Next Breath is not available the whole thing yet, but we can watch the trailer. Where do we go to do that?
You could see the trailer on, in fact, if you go to my website too, you could see the links to Honey Bunny, to Meet the Biz, to My Next Breath. And there's a trailer on there for each of them. I mean, I don't know when My Next Breath is going to come out. I'm just going with the flow on that one. You know, these documentaries sometimes I think take years. In fact, I think when Streisand did Yentl, it took, I don't know how many years to finally get out. So, you know, when it comes out, it'll be the perfect breath.
It was worth it. We also should say before we go, because you mentioned that you work with, so you truly are collaborative and you work with so many different organizations. We mentioned Joey Travolta, Inclusion Films.
Yes,
you mentioned Born to Act. I'm trying to think, Actors for Autism. All these different organizations that you work with, but what you do, it doesn't pay for itself. And so Meet the Biz has a place where people can make donations to keep the work that you're doing going. Do you want to take just a second to talk about where they can find that?
Yes, and thank you for that, because I forget. You know, I just do my thing, but forget, oh yeah, I have to pay the captioning or the interpreters or this or that. And we have a GoFundMe that will really help us out. It's a www.gofundme/inclusivebiz. INCLUSIVEBIZ. So go to, I think I spelled that right. So yeah, GoFundMe Inclusive Biz, and just whatever you can do, and you could see all the stuff that we do, and it keeps us going.
And I gotta say, you know, I'm always putting this out to our listeners that I know sometimes you're in a place where you're like, well, I don't have any money to donate. And you know, that isn't always the thing. Sometimes you could just share it on your social media because somebody you know has the money to donate to it. Or sometimes you go, I don't have $100 to give, but I have $10 to give. And the truth is that if everyone who watched this gave $10, then David would be able to continue doing these services for probably another year or two. Yeah. So it's about doing what you can do. And I know that everybody can do something to keep this work going. Because here's the truth, you guys, if we don't help support people like David, who has been supporting our community for all this time, they won't continue because they can't. You know, there's somebody who's watching this that it hasn't occurred to them that they could be doing things like David is. And maybe if they see, oh, look, that's a viable thing and the community supports that, then they will also support. I think that you did it because it was your passion, but let's make it more people's passion.
Well, it's my passion and I love it. And when I first started the GoFundMe, I was like, oh, I don't want to do a GoFundMe. But then I'm so glad that I did, because it got the message out there to what's going on. People said, I didn't know this was going on. And so it was great. And what's nice too is we do have the umbrella nonprofit of Performing Arts Studio West. So some people say, hey, I want to donate a little more. Is there a nonprofit we could go through? So we have that as well, which is so nice.
Wonderful. So let's, if they go to your website, is that the hub where they can find everything?
Yes, the www.davidszimmerman.com.
And what does the S stand for, David?
Sexy.
I know it's such a thing. It's such a thing in Hollywood. That people have the middle initial. Is it because somebody else had already in SAG had already taken David Zimmerman?
Well, no, SAG, I have David Zimmerman, but there are a lot of David Zimmermans out there. And my mom kept on saying, why not use your middle name? And I actually have two middle names, David Shea Samuel Zimmerman, one from each grandfather.
Two S's.
Two S's, but the SS Poseidon.
Yeah.
I'm not.
I know. I wouldn't want to do that.
I'd rather do David S stands for both, everything. So.
Well, we love it. We absolutely. So davidszimmerman.com. Go there to find all the things. If nothing else, you must go there today and watch Honey Bunny. And when it makes you feel better, go over and donate $5 or more over to the GoFundMe. So that David can continue doing what he's doing. And so when will the Kobe Bird interview be out?
Either next week or the following week. I'm not sure yet. I'm actually 2 weeks ahead because when I first started all these interviews, I just did maybe one or two a day. And then I finally went, oh, I have to take a break.
Eat, sleep,
yes,
all of those things. Well, it's one of those funny things in life when, I was on the phone with Joey Travolta and he said, oh, you've got to have him on the show. And I said, yes. And so we friended each other on Facebook and you said your new favorite show on Netflix is Lock and Key. And I went, well, David, have you interviewed Kobe Bird? And you were like, well, I'm interviewing him tomorrow. And I went, okay, something's happening here. There's a convergence of something. Because Kobe is one of our family. Kobe's mom is one of my best friends. She's my bestie.
I tell you, that whole family is just gorgeous, and what a joy it is to connect with them. And Kobe is so talented, and
he's a light.
And Joey, again, I just have to say, Joey is a blessing too. And I have an interview with Joey, and you could hear more about it. But we are heart brothers.
Tell us why. I already know why, but tell us why.
We are heart brothers because we both had a heart attack on the same day. I know, it's knock wood. It's sometimes am I still here? But anyway, that's the short version of it. But I mean, not the same day, years apart, probably the same time, who knows? But
I was just going to say, have you figured out what time it was? Was there something happening? Were you both watching something on the news? Because that'll do it to you.
No, I woke up and I felt pressure and I was going, this is not acid reflux. And then the next day, I think somebody texted me when I was in the hospital and said, did you hear Joey had one? I went, what? So it's amazing how, we're all connected. Like you said, a convergence is happening. And I really think there is a strong convergence in the world. And that's not this foo. I think it's true. I think the energy of love, you could see what hate does and you could see what love does. So, hey, get the stuff that makes the trees grow and the flowers and
yes,
let's choose that.
Let's choose that. Well, I honestly would like to clone you. And I'm so glad that now the convergence has happened. And so you've been on the show and now we're friends for life. I know you may choose otherwise, but that's too bad.
Oh, no. And you're going to be on my show soon, aren't you?
I have nothing to add to that, but I'm always willing, but I have nothing to add to that. But, so excited to see your interview with Kobe because we absolutely adore him and we love Lock and Key too. And if any of you have not watched Lock and Key, I don't know what you've been doing in this COVID madness because it's there and it's available to you.
And it's so fun.
And they have started, I think this week they start season 2 that they're filming. So that's a very good thing because if you've watched it, I'm not giving anything away, but you're going to want to see season 2.
And I won't give anything away about our interview too, because there's a little surprise here and there too.
Is there? Well, I can't wait to tune in to see, because we absolutely adore him and his whole family. So wonderful. But people should be checking out your other interviews. Check out the Julie Newmar that I was talking about. Check out the interview with Joey Travolta. How about
Jerry
Elaine
Jules.
Hall? Jerry Jules. See
Kathy
what's happening
Buckley.
with her. I mean, come on. And I want to come to class with Lainey Kazan. Stop it.
Oh
Like,
my
are
God.
you kidding me? I adore her.
Oh, she's amazing. Did you see her interviews yet?
I did not watch that yet. That would have, I wouldn't even have been able to talk to you. I would have been, I would have plotzed. I adore her. Absolutely adore her. And if you don't know who Lainey Kazan is, you do. You just don't realize that that's who she is. But she, probably the thing that people would most know her for is My Greek Wedding. She's the mom, and she is so freaking funny in that. She's puts amazing. Me out. I can't even.
She has such a history, and
yeah, she's just, but has done so many things and is one of the funniest actresses that there is. I'm a huge, huge fan of hers. All right. I promised that I was going to let you go before this, and then I kept you too long.
That's okay. I've enjoyed it.
I've enjoyed it too. Thank you so much. So everyone go right now, davidszimmerman.com. Make sure that you watch Honey Bunny and then support what this gentleman is doing, because it is what we need more of in our community. It's what we need more of on our planet. Thank you, David. And everybody go check out Meet the Biz.
Thank you, Shannon.
We adore you already. So to you as well. Have a great day. I'm going to close out the show, but you are free to go. You are excused from class.
Thank you. See you later.
All right. I just want to take a second to say to you guys that tomorrow is 9/11, and we are going to do a very special salute to caregivers, or people who are first responders and who have kiddos on the autism spectrum. And we feel that that's a very important day to commemorate in a way that is productive for our community. And that's what Nancy and I, we've taken a month off of doing Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy, but Nancy and I are back tomorrow, and that is what we will be doing tomorrow. So we hope that you will be here with us to take a moment and talk about some of the positives about our first responders and some of the first responders who are doing double duty. They're, working to keep people safe, but they also have kiddos at home that they're dealing with some of the challenges that some of you might be dealing with. So all of that tomorrow. Until then, please give your kiddos a hug from me and one for you too. Bye-bye for now.
The advice and opinions expressed by the host of Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. The Center for Autism and Related Disorders advises working with a board-certified behavior analyst who has experience with autism before starting any intensive behavioral intervention. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
Good morning.
Good morning.
And welcome to Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy on Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod.
And I'm Nancy Allspaw Jackson.
And it's 9/11, and
Yes.
A very important day that we want to make sure that we commemorate all of the amazing and devastating things that happened on that day many years ago. And we had put it out on our schedule that we wanted to make sure that we were doing a special salute to first responders that are individuals who have kiddos who are on the autism spectrum. And I want to say, you know, initially we had wanted to have a bunch of parents on. It's a very weird time in our climate with a lot of the things that we're going to talk about in the news coming up. And I don't think that anybody felt especially warm and squishy about doing a show this week and talking about that particular topic. I think it was inconvenient this week, and there's a lot of other stuff going on. But I think Nancy and I both feel particularly, I don't know what the right word is, respectful, indebted. We want to honor people who are first responders, and people who do service. And I know that's a very important thing for you, Nancy. I can't even imagine, you know, as we watch today in Southern California with all the fires that are happening
Right.
here and up the coast, the west coast of the United States, and all the firefighters, men and women who are leaving their homes in this COVID situation and going out there and trying to save other people's homes. It is amazing. And to know that statistically there is a large portion of those people who are leaving homes where they have kiddos on the autism spectrum.
Right.
And so we want to acknowledge how amazing the work that all of our first responders do, and how much we rely upon them. And that despite, you know, and we're going to talk more in a minute about some of the things happening in the last week, but we know that there are so many. I think the overwhelming majority of people who go into a service industry go into it for the right reasons, because they want to
I
make a difference.
agree. I agree. And we can't lose sight of that when there are stories to the contrary of that, of the very few that, you know, don't respond appropriately. We have to remember the thousands of first responders who do respond appropriately, and especially, as you said, in this time of the wildfires and in this time of COVID.
Yes.
All of the first responders that had been fighting this for the last, I mean, since the beginning of March, you know, we're really, I don't think anybody had any clue of how long this pandemic was going to last.
Well, and when you look at, I don't know what the actual statistics are. I wish I had them to pull up for you, but I know that last week they announced on the news here in Los Angeles that more police officers have died of COVID this year than any other, you know, including work related. And although they believe that in most cases it was work related, how they contracted COVID. You know, it's a very sensitive time. I don't want to lose sight of the fact that in all professions, you're going to have people who are in there for the wrong reasons or don't belong in those jobs. And regardless of the fact that so many are there for the right reasons, we still have to make sure that we are weeding out the people who should not be in this profession. We still have to make sure that they get the proper training, and that they're being used properly. But we have to salute the vast majority of our first responders who are out there being heroes and doing a very good job, and that it is a necessary job. I wanted to take just a second with you, Nancy, and have us each tell a little bit about what 9/11 was like for us. It is frightening to think to me that there are adults now, adults who were not yet alive when 9/11 happened, right? Isn't that the thing that there are this year?
Adults?
Yes, isn't, because how many years ago? I'm not good at math. Yeah. No, there are 18-year-olds that are out there that were not yet born.
Right. My son
Yes.
is one of
Yes.
them.
So they were not on the planet when it happened. And I think it is important for those of us who were to tell the stories of what happened and what we experienced on that day. And you have a pretty amazing story. As I said to you last night, in a real sense, you became a mom on 9/11.
That's
So
right.
you want to tell your story?
Yeah. We had been trying to adopt or trying to have a child in general, and had had many struggles with that. After my husband was diagnosed with prostate cancer, we weren't able to have a child in the typical biological way. We had to do in vitro, and the in vitro didn't work. And then we tried an egg donor, and that failed. we tried a domestic adoption, which didn't go through, the first one we tried. And then we had a really horrific adoption scam.
Yeah.
We were set up with a birth mother who wasn't even pregnant. But of course, I didn't know that till much later. And she effectively stole our money and really hoodwinked us, and was doing it to many couples. And that was devastating. That was a devastating experience. And we were connected to that birth mother through an adoption attorney, and later found out that it's not incumbent upon the private adoption attorneys to check out proof of identification or proof of pregnancy. She had forged all those things.
Wow.
And I was just recovering from the blow of that after catching her in this tremendous scam lie that she had perpetrated on us, and had pretty much given up any hopes of adopting. And on 9/11, of course, as everybody was watching, the first Trade Center had collapsed. And I was watching the screen, and as the second Trade Center, right before the second Trade Center collapsed, the phone rang, and it was the adoption attorney's assistant saying a new birth mother had come in. And literally, as that second Trade Center collapsed, I had the premonition that this was going to be our child. So that was on 9/11, and Wyatt was born on 11/9. After hearing about this birth mother, I went into the adoption attorney's office and saw the paperwork, and on the following weekend was on a flight out of Burbank because LAX was closed, I believe.
Yeah.
And went down to meet the birth mother in Phoenix, Arizona.
Amazing. Amazing. And I know that in that moment, because we've talked about this before, when that second Trade Center was falling and they were saying to you, there's a baby, and you know, there was a moment when you were like, is there going to be a world in which to bring this baby in?
When she said there's a baby, I'm like, I don't even know if we're going to be, what's going to be happening in our world.
Yeah.
And I thought of all the parents who would never be coming home to a child,
Yeah.
that this was their last time being alive.
Yeah.
And it was a really, I thought as this child might be coming into my life, so many parents would never be seeing their children again.
Yeah. Horrifying. And for me, it's funny, sometimes you feel like, and I sort of feel like the world felt that something was coming. We had an event where I lived probably a month before, where a police officer on a routine check, there had been a complaint about something, about somebody. He went to a house, and this young man opened the door, and the police officer was just like going to talk to him about his sprinklers or something. But the he was an adult. He was hiding a whole bunch of guns and ammo, and it turned into this very suburban neighborhood in which I was working. And it turned into this SWAT team, helicopters. The house blew up. It was craziness. There was a police officer that lost his life. Everybody felt very unsettled. And I remember talking with my employer about it. I was like, I feel unsettled. She said, I feel unsettled too. It feels like what's happening when this can happen in a neighborhood, like what is happening? And it set me to thinking about, for whatever reason, about what I was doing and why I was doing it. And I had moved to LA and had, after years of teaching, I had gotten a job working as an agent, a talent agent, submitting people for television and film roles.
I never knew you did that.
Well, for like about a 9-month period, I was an agent, and I didn't like it. I didn't like it at all. And I was reevaluating, going, is this really what I want to do? And I had been a teacher and a performer, and my master's degree is in theater. And so as I was like, oh, I don't know if this is what I want to do, Disney had reached out to me, and they, of course they have the Lion King, and in the Lion King they have all these young performers. And as you know, as we've talked about many times on the show before, there's a lot of disparity about education. And for the performers that go into the Lion King, to be on a Broadway show or a Broadway tour, it's very exhausting for the kiddos. They can, they have to have multiple kiddos to play the same role. So if a kiddo is sick, or you just can't work a kiddo that hard, and they have to have a certain level of training. And what they were finding is for the population that they needed to play these roles, which are usually black and brown children, that they didn't have a lot of formal training in singing and dancing and acting. So Disney had decided that they were going to do a program where they were going to go to certain cities, and they were going to put together these small academies, which were going to give free acting and singing and dance lessons to people in the community, and hopefully to identify talent and cultivate talent that potentially could go into the Lion King or into other shows that Disney was putting together. And so they reached out to me and asked me if I would come and work for them and be the acting coach for the young teenage kids, not the little kids. And so I had just the night before 9/11 given notice and said, I'm leaving this and I'm going to go work for Disney, and that's what I'm going to do. And I was supposed to start with Disney on the 16th of September. And the next morning, my employer called me, and after we'd talked to it, and she understood, and she was like, it's fine. And, I'm glad for you that you're going to go and do this. Went to bed knowing that I was leaving my job to go to something else. Woke up to her calling me in the morning, and it was, I don't know, like 7:00 Pacific time. And she said, are you watching the news? You need to turn on the news. It's so horrible. Turn the news on. And I couldn't believe my eyes. And so that was 9/11. And of course, everything changed on that day, and the airports were shut down. And they, for a couple of days here in LA, the shows weren't open, but by the 15th, the Lion King was back open at the Pantages, and I had tickets to go on the 15th. And it was the first live show that they did after 9/11. And I was supposed to start the next day, but they had postponed. But I went and saw the Lion King, and they came out before, and everybody had a moment of silence and held hands, and we prayed as an audience in the Pantages for everyone and for the world. And they said, and obviously, if there's a need to stop the show, if anything is happening, we will. We want you to enjoy, and let us be in charge of that, but we will. If there's a reason why we need to stop the show, we will. And so we all watched the show with this sense of camaraderie. And I love live theater. And then after the show was over, the cast came out in all of their Lion King regalia, but they took off their masks, put them on top of their heads, and we all stood up and sang "God Bless America."
Oh, what a beautiful moment that must have been.
To this day, I well up when I think about it, because it was the most patriotic I think I've ever felt in my entire life.
Right.
Now, sadly, Broadway was closed for like a month, and a lot of the tours got postponed, and the academy that Disney was doing got postponed and postponed and postponed. And ultimately, it did not happen in the way that they had envisioned it. And so I never did go to work for Disney. And, I think about it all the time. And when I tell people this, they're like, oh my gosh, you lost a career with Disney. And I always say, if that's the only thing I lost in 9/11, I did really well.
Right.
Because one of my favorite students of all time, a lot of my students were working in New York at the time that the towers went down. And one of my favorite students was working in the towers. And he was not there that morning because he had an audition. But the young man that was not my student, but was his best friend, was in the towers and perished. And I remember shaking when I heard that Noah was okay, that he had been at an audition. And so he was not able to be at work that morning. And when I think about the loss of life, absolutely devastating. So we just wanted to take that moment this morning. And I know that you guys may have stories. I did not say we are live, and we relish you guys writing in and commenting. You can do that right now on our Facebook, on our YouTube. We'd love to hear from you how you commemorate this day. What is the memory for you? Is there a message of hope in what you have experienced? Because heaven knows, a lot of people are comparing this morning that as a nation, we're also going through something now. As a world, we're going through something right now. But I especially want to give a shout out, and I know Nancy does too, to those families who are first responders who also have kiddos on the autism spectrum. I don't want you to feel forgotten. We appreciate you, and we appreciate
There
you
may
today.
be dog barking in here in a minute, Shannon.
Okay, well, we're not hearing anything yet, but it happens.
Yeah, it happens. Life is going on behind us as we're doing this webcast. There we go.
There we go. There we go. Dogs, just like the dogs behind you in the picture. Okay, so let's, and if it gets particularly bad, I know sometimes I have to mute myself, Nancy, for a couple of seconds until, but you're fine right now. So don't worry about it.
I'll mute her when I'm going to let her out the door in a second here.
Okay. All right. So, but I'd like to switch gears a little bit and talk about the news, because we have some, even update breaking news with some things going on here in the autism community. We talked a little bit on Wednesday, but we didn't get a chance to talk with Nancy about the ongoing story of this, the 13-year-old in Utah who was shot. One of the things that's been reported in the last couple of days by an outlet in the state of Utah is that this occurred exactly one day before they were rolling out a new de-escalation policy of how to de-escalate things. I know I have been one of the people screaming and yelling about this the last couple of days that, I don't relish the fact that when something happens, everybody starts pointing fingers. Well, it's so-and-so's fault. Well, it's the police, it's this, it's that policeman. And in this particular instant, I'm a big one about we need training and experts. Now, I think it's a little, I don't know what Utah has in place, but they're saying, well, we had something that was supposed to start a day later. That feels a little pat to me. And I hope that they're really honestly looking at what they're doing to see if it's going to be effective, because if they're going to hang their hat on that, I'm a little concerned. And you, Nancy?
Yeah, I'm hoping, you can only hope that this would have prevented this from happening.
Yeah. If you're a day away from rolling it out, how does this happen the day before you do? It doesn't.
Right.
Doesn't
it's
work
just a horrible irony that this happened a day before they rolled it out. And I know more and more police departments around the country are doing this kind of training, which is great. But we urge all police departments to get this training, because it's so horrific when an incident like this happens, because unfortunately, as we said, there's so many great first responders, but this shines a light on those who are not.
Well, and I think, I said this the other day, it comes down to perspective taking for me. You and I have been in circumstances in our life where we have seen what it looks like when a person on the spectrum, even a 5-year-old or an 8-year-old or a 13-year-old, when they're having a meltdown. And I think that there are many people who have not seen what that looks like.
Right.
And I know that, I'm trying to think, probably the last time that my son had a meltdown in public where people saw it, he might have been 8 years old. But I remember like it was yesterday how everyone, because he had been around, he'd been at his school and he'd never had a meltdown, and then he had a meltdown. And I remember even the school psychologist, she was like, I'd never seen anything like that in the world. I had no idea that that could happen. I had no idea that he was capable of doing that. We've never even seen a glimmer of that. And I wanted to smack her upside the head. And go, you of all people, because she acted like it was like this thing that she wanted to get far away from. Now, I do remember the first time that I saw it, I was scared. I was scared.
Absolutely.
And I'm at a place now where I've had the opportunities, especially when we do Sensitive Santa, I get to see 200 kids within a 24-hour period of all over the spectrum of all ages. And I've seen a lot. I will not say that I've seen everything, but I understand why somebody would be afraid. I get it. But I do think that with knowledge and support, there's no reason to be afraid. But this parent called 911 for a reason, because she was afraid and she needed support.
Right.
And she was afraid of what was going to happen. So I wish that everybody would look at it through that lens, because some people are like, he's a 13-year-old, what on earth, what is wrong with you? And I agree that I don't think that we need to ever, on the spectrum, not on the spectrum, need to pick up a gun against a 13-year-old. And I've seen some things in my life, and a 13-year-old can be out of control and dangerous. I get it.
Right.
I totally get it. But I have seen experts deal with it. And if you have an expert, there's a way to deal with it. So I just don't believe that young man need to be shot, but I think we have to stop acting like it's so crazy that it could happen. If somebody didn't know and saw that behavior, I could understand completely why they would be afraid of something bad happening.
Right. I can as well. I mean, my son has had some pretty violent tantrums and continues. We're putting more boundaries in place. And he had a tantrum a month ago where he kicked down the wall, kicked down a door in our house. And that was a month ago.
Yeah.
Because of some boundaries we put in place for him.
And I'm sure that was scary for you.
It was very scary that he could get that angry.
And I don't think that there's a parent.
Happened, he started, with COVID and with the restrictions of him not being able to go to school and not being able to do his regular activities, he's had a return to some tantrums. Thankfully, they have ceased.
Yeah.
But when COVID first started, he had some pretty violent tantrums, and he's 18 and, can get pretty physical and aggressive.
And if there's any parent, and I said this on Wednesday, if there's any parent out there whose child of any age, has had a meltdown and there wasn't even a little bit of fear either for the child or that the child could hurt themselves or hurt someone else, including the parent, I want to say congratulations if you have not experienced that, but I don't know any autism parents that have not experienced that, where at least one day at one time that they were concerned about safety. So I just don't think that having a police force that doesn't know what that looks like and how to respond to it, that can't be a good idea.
Right.
And to say, well, we were training them and we were getting ready to roll it out tomorrow is not a reason for me.
No, not a reason. And the child did not have a weapon, certainly. And I don't think there's any reason unless it's self-defense. And I can't imagine that the officer in question thought that this child was going to do him, mortal harm.
I do think that that's what the officer thought.
That he thought the child was going to do him bodily harm, but would it have been mortal harm?
Right. And I think that that's a good point. Now, I love that Sally Burton Hoyle, who's a wonderful expert, has joined us on the chat and has said, do not invite the government police into your lives. And I think that is a crushing reality statement that makes me want to sob.
Well,
but
let's examine that statement. So
yes,
she's saying the mother should never have called the police.
Well, I think what she is suggesting is that when you call the police, you are inviting people who don't know how to treat our kids.
Okay.
And I think that unfortunately, and Sally, correct me if I'm saying anything that is not what you're saying, but I think that is the truth. I think that is the current status. It pains me because I think that there are parents out there who are like, well, then who do I call? And I would love to say, a lot of different answers, but we've seen, Nancy, in our time doing this show, people who've taken their kids to the emergency room and that didn't go well. We've seen people who called the police and other than this child, it didn't go well, right? People who've called Child Protective Services and that didn't go well. I think that the only time I've seen it go well is when you're already working with a team of people that are autism experts, and then you
Right.
call those people.
Right.
And that's unfortunately in my Santa bag, that's all I have for people. If you are somebody who doesn't have access already to a team of people who are helping you, I want to encourage you to do that. That chances are that your insurance or the government will pay for that. Make sure you get somebody who's good quality. And I know that's a mixed bag. But for people who are in remote areas, it's like, well, who do you call? I don't fault this parent for calling the police, but I agree with you, Sally Burton Hoyle, that I don't think that I would not recommend people that is the way you pursue help if your child is having a meltdown.
Yeah, but
Not
that
at this
leaves a lot of parents with no options, I think.
I understand. Yes. And I think that is a disservice. And I am lobbying hard for police to change how they do things. And I always have to come back to, what is our part in it? And I feel like it's hard because the self-advocates constantly are online and they tell parents, stop posting pictures of your child having a tantrum. It's inhumane. They're going to grow up. Those pictures will be there. I get it from their point of view, but I want to say to those self-advocates, by not allowing the public to see what a meltdown and a tantrum looks like, we're just exacerbating the problem.
Right. I agree Shannon, with that.
So, but I understand where they're coming from too. It's a very hard line, but I think here on Autism Live, we need to be showing more of that and showing, the truth of that sometimes it's not pretty. And sometimes it requires thought and patience, and you will find yourself afraid, and here's what to do then.
I'll never forget the time when my son when Wyatt had a particularly violent tantrum, and it happened to be when his regional center coordinator was visiting, which turned out to be opportune for me because she saw how out of control he could get. The dog, he was outside, he had a sandwich, the dog ate the sandwich, and he went into a complete meltdown. And she was there, and it lasted for a half an hour. And he was about 8 or 9 years old at the time. And she was able to see what I had to deal with on occasion.
Yeah.
And it got me more behavioral therapy.
Yeah. And more support. Because I do think when people, I have long said, if we could say to every sitting politician with up and down, I don't care what your political affiliation is, make every sitting politician go and do a 48-hour visit, live in with a family with kiddos on the spectrum, everything would change. Everything would change. Because I think that as much as we talk about autism awareness and everybody's aware, I don't think that people are aware, which is part of what I want to talk about with our late breaking story. That I don't know if you guys watch the show Big Brother. It's on CBS. It is a show that has been on for decades, and my family, my husband and I watch it. I will admit it's a guilty pleasure of ours. And
I have to admit that I've never seen an entire episode.
Well, I would love to tell you that you're totally okay in the world and that you haven't missed anything, but for us, it is a guilty pleasure. We like to watch it. It's usually on just in the summer, although sometimes when something happens, like when there was the writer's strike, they had a season when it was on during the winter. And what they do is they take a group of people and, they cast people from different walks of life and they shove them into a house together, and there are hidden cameras everywhere, and they agree to be on camera 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and mic'd. And there are production agreements that they have that they understand that they're being filmed. And they show 3 times a week, they will show you what's happening in the house, and they have contests, and every week they vote somebody out. And the last person in the house wins $500,000. So, but then there are things that happen, those things that you watch are usually edited, right? But there's stuff happening in the house 24 hours a day, and they put out a live feed and you can subscribe to it to watch and see what's happening. They will still blur some of it out so that they don't give away big spoiler alerts to ruin the show. But I don't usually ever watch the live feeds. We just watch the show that's on CBS 3 times a week. Now, a couple of years ago, they had a young man who was on the show, and I think he was 19 at the time, Ian, I'm referring to. And I remember seeing this young man in the house, and as things would happen, I would go, I think he belongs to us. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like I never want to diagnose anybody, but I was like, I think he plays on our team, is what I'm saying. Delightful, intelligent young man, but a little quirky.
Right.
And I remember thinking, oh, Ian's with us. Well, Ian won. And it was so exciting. He won the $500,000 and we were like, yay, Ian won. Well, now this summer now I've got my dog barking. Now this summer, because of COVID, they decided to do a superstars, like some of the biggest people who have ever been on Big Brother, fan favorites, some of them people who had won, some people who had not. And they put them into quarantine so that they could all be in the house together. And Ian is
Wait a
back.
minute, they had them all together in the house? What did they do? Did they do tests to make sure they weren't?
They did testing. They did testing, repeated testing. They put them up in hotels. They isolated them for 2 weeks. And then they all agreed, signed all their things, but they're in the house right now together here in Los Angeles. And, they created a pod. They call it a bubble.
Ian is one of those individuals.
Ian agreed to come back to participate this year. And because he's a little older and he's a little bit, more, in a place where he feels like he can be more open, he decided very early on to this season that he identified himself as being on the autism spectrum. On the show.
Is he Asperger's or does he?
Well, Asperger's doesn't really exist as a diagnosis anymore, but we would definitely have said that he is of the Asperger type. Very, very smart. He's like some sort of physicist or mathematician or something, and very strategic. He sometimes has some social things where he'll go, I didn't get that, but he's pretty savvy, I gotta say. But this season, because he is out and identified himself, we're seeing, I think before CBS was maybe, I don't know, maybe he didn't have as many self-stimulatory behaviors before, but we're definitely seeing them this season. And we're seeing, that he rocks a lot. And we're able to see it and identify it and go, oh, look, there it is. Well, in the last 48 hours, we've seen some pretty disturbing stuff in the house where other of his housemates, unbeknownst to him, because, you're able to see multiple cameras, have said some pretty horrible things. The kind of stuff that just as a mom, you just go, oh, it just makes me feel so bad.
What are some of the things they've said, Shannon?
Well, one of the guys in the house who I've already had a problem with, like this guy, I've been like, ooh, I have a problem with this guy anyway, because he has said some really horrible things to another cast member that I had issue with. He's there in a bedroom with 3 of the women on the show, and he goes off on Ian and says that he's like the red rum of Big Brother, which is a reference to the movie The Shining. And he says he's creepy and he's always there. You turn around and he's standing there. And that he's constantly rocking and that he creeps him out and that he doesn't like to be around him. And he says, it's like I'm afraid I'm gonna have this nightmare, and in my nightmare I'm gonna open my eyes and Ian's gonna be right in front of me and he's gonna be rocking, like depicting him as someone that he's afraid of. And that he's creepy and that he lurks. Right. And I'm like, you're locked in a house with a bunch of people. Of course, every time you turn around, he's going to be there. Right? I want to call this guy a lot of names. But he's in this performance for these 3 girls and he's like, oh, and he's this, and he's really denigrating this young man. And the 3 women are giggling and going, oh, I know. And then he leaves, and one of the women says, I really don't want to be like him because sometimes he can be really mean and he can be cruel. And she goes, but I got to be honest, like he makes me nervous. And she says the way
Ian makes her nervous.
Ian makes her nervous, the way he's in constant movement. She goes, it makes me nervous. And she goes, is it me, you guys? I don't want to be like that guy, the guy who just left. I don't want to be like him, but is it me? She goes, like, I'll come into a room and he's moving and it makes me nervous. And I need to move to the other side of the room because I don't want to be around him. And the other women kind of giggle and go, yeah, I know. And nobody takes up for poor Ian.
Mm-hmm.
And so people, you know, the internet has exploded with people on the spectrum saying that this is crap. And I guess there's been other things that have been said, but I don't know, you know, what they are because I'm not watching the live feeds. But
Now, is everybody on the show is aware that he has autism?
yes. And the one girl who said he makes me nervous has made comments to other people on the show about she thinks that he's just using that to get ahead in the game. The other thing that the guy was making fun of is saying, you know, and what is this? Like, you're trying to talk to him and all of a sudden it's like, he's like a robot and he just starts spitting out all these big words. And I want to say, buddy, it's because he knows more words than you do. Like, I really don't like this guy, but he's making fun of him. So anyway, everybody is mad. Everybody is saying that this is inappropriate, that this is them making fun of him because of his disability. They're asking CBS to censure. I mean, people are asking for everything under the sun. They're asking for CBS to come out with a statement to say that it's inappropriate to make fun of someone because they have a disability. They're asking them to, there is a diary room where they can pull those people in and talk to them and say, you need to stop that. And they have asked, there's a precedent, they've asked people to stop singing on the show. So they certainly, and they've asked people in the past, I mean, people have done some pretty horrible things on the show. One woman took another contestant's toothbrush and cleaned the toilet with it and then put it back for them to use it. And they shut that down. They got rid of the toothbrush, called her in and said, you're in trouble if you do this again, you're off the show. So it's not like there isn't a precedent for saying, hey, and supposedly the one woman who said he makes me nervous, they had called her into the diary room and had, I don't know what the conversation was, but it had, before this happened, supposedly had a conversation with her and said, you need to, you know, watch what you say and pull it back or whatever. She was censured having to do with Ian. So we're waiting to see what will happen. But I think it's a learning moment, a teaching moment. On the one hand, I'm so horrified for this young man who is so sweet and so smart. And last night we were watching the show and I said, I wish we could, like, I don't have the rights to CBS's stuff, but there was a moment where all the contestants are sitting there and they're getting ready to evict someone. And I said, I would like to just show 30 seconds of this on television because Ian is rocking. He is sitting there and he's rocking, but one of the girls, her foot is going like this. And one of the girls who was like, I know, when she said it makes me nervous, is sitting there and going like this with her toes. Every single one of them has something going on. Every single one of them. Yes, Ian's is a little bit bigger, but they are all engaged in self-soothing behavior. And I would like for the world to look at that. I feel like for that twit girl who said, it makes me nervous. I don't know about you, Nancy, but I just feel like I've been through that with in my son's life with so many people, and it's devastating to hear that. I think it's her truth. And I don't want to say to people that you're not allowed to talk about your truth, but I wish that someone had said, what makes you nervous about that? Why does it make you nervous when somebody else is rocking? Do you think that has more to do with you than with him? Like, I wish somebody had said that. Now, the girl who just laughed and responded and said, I know, me too. She has sponsorships outside of the show because she had already been on the show twice before. So for instance, she had a sponsorship with the Olay company. And Olay yesterday came out and said, we are ending our relationship with her because we have a very hard line about bullying and participation in bullying and mocking disabilities, and we don't want to have any part of this.
Would you consider what she did bullying, though? It sounds like it wasn't quite to that level.
Well, I got to be honest with you that because people were throwing a lot of accusations, and I thought, well, on the one hand, Ian was not in the room. Ian does not yet know that they said these things about him. But every single person who went into that house understood and signed a contract saying, you will film everything that I say and it will be available for all people. So they do know that Ian will see this at some point. And they know that America is watching. And so in that respect, I absolutely do think that it's bullying.
Okay.
I absolutely do. And I know it's a funny line, but when I think about what Ian is going to feel like when he sees that,
Yes.
that is what I think is really wrong. And I really think we need to be honest and kind of gird our loins for the fact that, you know, people are uncomfortable, but it's because of ignorance. I was raised by a woman who was, she did not use the term handicapped, but my mother was born with both of her feet facing backwards. Almost always in my childhood, my mother was in a cast, a brace, a wheelchair, or she was limping. Those were the options, right? And there were things we couldn't do because my mom couldn't get up the stairs. I mean, we lived with that day in and day out.
And I was raised with a brother with Down syndrome.
Yeah.
And knew what it was like to go into places where strangers stared at you,
Yes.
made comments, and I grew up feeling that sense of separation as a young girl. You know, I grew up knowing what the pain of that was like, of being made to feel different.
Yeah. And you know, there's this insidious thing in life, and I've seen this with my mother and with my son, where you'll make a friend and you'll be with a friend or a colleague, and you're hanging out and you feel like you're accepted and your kid is accepted and everything is wonderful. And then comes the moment when they say something and you realize, oh, they're uncomfortable or they don't want to be around us, and it's devastating. It's absolutely devastating when you see the truth of how people feel. And I know that this isn't just the disability community. I think, you know, this spans everything, that when people are nervous about being with someone who is different, when they feel like, well, I don't like that because it makes me feel uncomfortable, it tears me to the soul. You know, my niece said something recently and I thought it was brilliant, and then and she said, no, I learned this from you. Because she said she has a hearing thing and somebody said something to her about how frustrating it was because her hearing aids or whatever, and she wasn't hearing them, and they were like, and she said, I know, this is so frustrating for you. But I just want you to think about the fact that you're only having to deal with this for the 10 minutes that you're talking to me, and I have to deal with it for the rest of my life. And she said that I had done that in front of her at a Subway sandwich place because I was asking them to change their gloves to make a sandwich for my son and I, that to make a salad for us, and we allergic to, can't have gluten. And this girl was so put out. And I had said to her, I get it. This is so frustrating for you. It's lunch hour. And I see the frustration. I'm 100% clear. I get it. And it's so frustrating, but in 10 minutes, I'm going to be out of your hair and gone, and this won't happen to you again. But he's going to deal with this for the rest of his life, and attitudes like yours. And she was shamed, man. She turned 68 kinds of purple. But I'm hoping that we will have a bigger conversation about this, Big Brother, because I don't think these people realize how horrible they were being. And I think that a lot of people would say, unfortunately, oh yeah, that makes me feel uncomfortable. But I hope we will start the conversations about, well, why? Why are you uncomfortable? I can remember a time when I was uncomfortable. And I would love to say that I'm never uncomfortable now, but when I'm uncomfortable now, I'm able to go, why? And think to myself, it's because I don't know what to do right now. It's nothing to do with that person. It's that I don't know what the rules are. I don't know. I've shared before that one of the biggest challenges that I've had in the years of doing this show is that there are times when we'll be out doing a live whatever, whether it's on the red carpet or at an event, and somebody will come up that I don't know, and we'll be live. We're like, "Hi, who are you?" And the dad, I can think of one instance in particular where the dad said, "Well, I'm, so-and-so, and this is my son." And I stick the microphone in the son's face, and I'm like, "So tell us about, what do you like about?" And the dad said, "Oh, no, he's nonverbal." And I was like, "Okay, well, and then I just kept asking questions because it was me being stupid and me not knowing, how do I conduct an interview with someone who is nonverbal? Like, I want to be able to communicate with this young man. And my uncomfortableness stems from, I want to communicate and I don't know how, because all the rules in my head of communication aren't going to apply here. Some of them will, but some of them
I
won't."
think the case of anybody that reacts to someone with a disability is about their own discomfort. You point out. I mean, that, or it's curiosity. Children do it oftentimes. I remember one time taking my brother to the Y to swim, and a child saying to me, "What's up with him?"
Yeah.
And I said, "Well, he's got something called Down syndrome." And the kid said, "Well, he seems like a good kid."
Right. Right. When we don't have fear attached to it,
it's just a curiosity oftentimes.
And I think that that's the proper way to deal with it. So I hope that CBS does come out with a statement. I hope that I hate to see it continue. And I hate to watch, unfortunately, the people who said the horrible things. And here's the other thing: the woman who lost her Olay contract, I'm sure that other people are like, "Yeah, she really wasn't the one saying things." But I'll tell you what, she sat there and said, "Me too." And in this world, we're not going to get anywhere unless people stand up and say, "Wait a second. Let's remember that Ian doesn't really have a choice about that."
Mm-hmm.
You have a choice about what you're saying, but Ian doesn't have a choice about that. And she carries herself as somebody who's a good person. And I'm sure that she felt socially awkward in the moment. But if you are going to be out there as a spokesperson, then you need to speak up. That's what spokespeople do. You need to represent. Now, many people outside the House, people who have already been voted off the show and are aware of the controversy, have stepped forward and said, "This is unconscionable. This is inappropriate." And two of the people who were on this particular season but were voted off in the last couple of weeks are alleging that there was more of this that was happening to his face.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I haven't watched, but I tweeted at those people and said, "Would you like to come on the show and talk about it?" So we'll see. But one of the gentlemen in particular, I'm speaking about, Kaser, said that before he left the House that he had an opportunity to sit and talk with Ian. He said, don't ever let anybody make fun of you. Don't ever, let anybody talk to you that way. Don't let them push you around. So I just want to be clear that we are in support of Ian. We are not in support of people making fun of disabilities. And I hope that Big Brother does and CBS does something, whether it's take these people aside and give them some training and sensitivity. But it is really poignant and hard right now for the autism community to watch these people be winning competitions and doing these things in other rooms. It kind of is a big turnoff.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope that CBS hears that and reacts. There are other issues. And over the years, this is not the first time that autism has been a controversy. Another guy who won on the show in a previous season said that he, on the show, identified himself as someone who worked with individuals on the autism spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
And he would always talk so positive about it. And then one night he sat and talked about how annoying his clients were.
Really?
And
that's shocking.
Yes. And, and the center, the autism center that he worked at, fired him on that day. But then he went on to win Big Brother, and at the ceremony got his check for $500,000, not knowing that he had lost his job. So this is not the first time that autism has come up on Big Brother. But in that case, we all already knew that he had lost his job. I think we were all like, okay, he's already been fired. He's a butthole. He should not be working with anyone. But it was still, I didn't want to watch him win $500,000. I wanted to throw up on him. And many times, almost every season, and this season is no exception, there are issues dealing with race and prejudice.
Uh-huh.
And they've had to give disclaimers before and say, we are showing this slice of life, but we don't agree with this person is saying. And I believe that this season, there's a lot of people that are really mad.
Well,
And
it sounds like Big Brother really is a slice of life, and you're going to have a lot of the issues that come up in everyday life. Certainly, the prevalence of autism, it stands to reason that there would be a contestant on the show who is on the spectrum, given the prevalence.
And I do think that that's part of why the show is successful, because I do think that there's an educational component to it. And this particular season, it's interesting because it's people who had been on the show before and were popular and have social media following. And it seems like each and every one of them came on with an agenda that there were things that they wanted to talk about, and things that they wanted to show the American public. It is a gut punch sometimes to see these things, and to watch people go through it, to see, it's just really, really hard. I think that there is a certain, last night, in case in point, there's a stereotype about, what people say and how they say it, in these microaggressions. That is the term that I want to use, and that's what everybody is talking about. There are these little microaggressions that people will say something about or to someone, and this guy, the one who said all the really negative things about Ian, he is like the captain of the microaggressions against other people in the house, and it's very pointed at who it's at. And I do think it's very racially motivated, and it is so ugly to watch. But what I think has been healing is to watch on the other side, the person who's dealing with the microaggression, who has the opportunity in the diary room to say, when this person says this is what it makes me feel like. And I wish people knew that when they say stuff like that, it feels like this to me. I think that is the healing part of what the show is. I do think that there is merit in it.
Yeah. I'm wondering how a lot of our parents deal with, if they have had instances where their kids have been made fun of, how they dealt with it. Have you ever had that happen to you, Shannon?
So many times.
Right.
And yes, I mean, and I would love to say that it still doesn't happen.
Right.
But, there are times even now for my son, girls can be really mean.
Yes, they can at a certain age, particularly.
And I've seen it in the last year, something where my son will just be asking someone a question, a girl. And I know that these girls would never think of themselves as being bullies, but he'll just ask a question, and because like he doesn't have permission to ask them or whatever, they'll give him a look like, get away from me. And it's just, I just want to like call the parents up of those girls and say, I get it. Your daughter is going through a whole other set of things, but she doesn't get to behave that way. Like that is just, Jem has been horribly bullied, and I'm so lucky that Jem is doing so well. But the flip side of that is that he is aware of when he is being bullied.
Right. And Wyatt is not aware of it. I don't believe.
But I know that Wyatt has been bullied.
Yes. I remember another incident when he was doing track, where he stopped on the track and started stimming, and two boys behind him were making fun of him and saying, what's he doing? And doing it just like him. And I stopped those boys. I try to use these as teachable moments.
Yeah.
And
you're much better about that in the moment than I am. I have seen
you get angrier. You just get angry initially?
I shut down. And I want to pull him away and I want to sequester him and I want to like move to a cabin and never be in the real world again.
I know. Well,
I-
it makes you feel that way. It makes you feel absolutely horrible and violated.
But
try to
I'm
do so.
not good at turning around. I've seen you in the moment turn around and say, this is my son Wyatt.
Right.
And, you know, and, you know, what is your name? And make them, you know, meet on their terms. I've watched you do that. And I've been very impressed with you over the years that you do that. I just go, foom, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I wonder how some of our parents out there deal with it. Write us and tell us how you do, because
Yeah, we're
I-
almost out of time.
Okay.
But I do want to say, Sally Burton Hoyle, that joined us a little while, she wrote in a
Yeah.
bunch of things while we were talking.
Oh, what did she
Um,
write? I'd
So,
love to hear
and
her opinion.
she was the person who said to us about, do not invite the government police into your lives. She said,
Right.
on several occasions when this was used with my brother, it had disastrous effects long term. A crisis plan should be developed, and that some state plan should be developed to address this statewide. In Michigan, through mental health agencies, there is a crisis team. But that, okay, and I'm piecing together from several comments that came after several deaths. And she said supports are mandatory and best when it is witnessed by mental health. And she also said, yay, ole. And I want to say yay, ole as well. I think it was the right move that Ole made. I support that. I think it was the only healing thing thus far that has come out of this, but I hope more healing will come out of it, because I do watch that show and I want to keep watching it and I will keep watching it to support Ian. But it makes me not enjoy it. If that is what they're going to do, is, you know, allow people to listen. I have not gotten over, and I know I'm going to open a can of worms here and we've got 1 minute, but you know, when our current president made fun of the reporter,
Right.
and I know that people have many different feelings about that. I've never gotten over that. I'm just saying. And I part of the reason why I've not been able to move past it is because it was explained away as that's not what was happening. And I think if you're a sentient adult, you know that that's what was happening.
Well, I think we all as adults need to be aware of our reaction to those with differences and be a model for those in the world. And once again, I just want to say, because we're, as you said, Shannon, we're almost out of time. We want to salute the first responders out there, particularly those who have kids on the spectrum, because we know how difficult their roles and jobs are in this time. And we appreciate you. And just our hats are off to you.
I want to say too, Mike Hipple wrote in and said an interesting note. A boy who has autism and uses an augmentative device spoke on a 9/11 ceremony a few years ago about saying that his father was in one of the buildings, and it was very powerful. Thank you for Mike. I think if people want to watch that, you should Google it to see if you can locate that. It sounds very inspirational, but thank you, Nancy, for bringing that around full circle. I want to remind everybody that next week we've got a big week of shows. Temple Grandin is going to be with us live on Tuesday. It is my birthday.
Great.
It is my birthday, and
Oh,
so
Shannon.
Temple Grandin is coming on the show live for my birthday. It just doesn't get better than that. And it was just Temple's birthday a couple of days ago, and so we'll chat about all that. But I am looking for questions. Temple prefers it when we get a flood of questions ahead of time. And I go through, because like 13 of you will ask questions about, you know, how do I find what my kid is good at? And so I kind of consolidate the questions into categories and give them to her. She does not like to answer questions that only an expert and a clinician would answer, but she loves to answer your other questions. That are specifically for her, about what it's like for her, or what she might recommend about a specific non-clinical thing. So I'm asking that people please write in those questions. You can send them, you can write them in here, you can send them over to me at s.penrod@autism-live.com. Because I know you're all going to want to write in on Tuesday, but I'm going to be answering questions that people wrote in today. So please submit your questions to me. So I've already got a couple of good ones, but I'd love a bunch more. So that will be on Tuesday. We do have Bonnie Yates with us on Monday. She's going to be talking with us more about distance learning and the things that we need to know about where our legal standing is with our kids doing distance learning. Because I don't know, it's a poo show for a lot of people, but some people have gotten it under control, and we want to get more of you with it under control and doing what's right by your kids. So that'll be Monday and Tuesday. And then we'll share with you about the rest of the week. It's a big week next week.
Great.
So until then, give your kiddos a hug from me.
And give yourselves a hug from me. Bye, Shannon.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye for now. Stay safe.